Good evening, everyone. I am Councillor Caroline Culver, Chairman of the newly formed Resources and Place Scrutiny Committee. This is our first meeting this evening. Members of the committee present this evening are Councillors Anthony Amatharaj, Jeremy Cottam, Laura Coyle, Ross McKinnon, Eric Pattenden, Christopher Reid, Richard Sumner and Howard Wollaston. I just especially want to welcome new full members of this meeting. So we have Councillors Coyle, Wollaston and Sumner. I know that you've all been to meetings as subs before, but welcome as full members of the committee. And I just want to thank the outgoing members of the Scrutiny Commission who used to be with us until recently, being Councillors Bowick, Martha Vickers and Paul Dick. And just want to acknowledge their contribution to the Scrutiny Commission. We are also joined this evening by Councillor Ian Cottingham, who will be with us for the finance items. Other councillors present in the meeting are Sarah Clark, Acting Executive Director for Resources, Shannon Coleman Slaughter, Service Director for Finance, Property and Procurement and Section 151 Officer, and Beatrix Texiera, who is also with us for the financial items. So thank you for joining us. Stephen Chard is clerk for the meeting. Welcome, Stephen. And thank you to Gordon Oliver, who was our clerk before. So looking forward to working with you, Stephen. And the meeting is being zoomed by Sam Chiverton. Tonight's meeting is being live streamed on YouTube, so members of the public are able to follow proceedings. If we hear the fire alarm, we must leave the building immediately via the emergency exits. The assembly point is the Dolphin car park. If the lockdown alarm sounds, we will await instructions from officers. We will adjourn the meeting until such time as it is safe to proceed. Finally, I would like to take the opportunity to remind members that we are subject to the Council's Code of Conduct, which requires us to uphold certain standards, including, importantly, respect. We may not always agree with one another, but I would ask that in our disagreements, we are always respectful of others' views. Just to mention also, it's obviously a very hot day today. Please recharge your water bottles if you need to. And if at any point in the meeting you want to have a quick 5-minute break, I think that's fine. So I'll leave it up to members to propose that if you so desire. Do members have any questions? No. Okay, great. Thank you. Any apologies?
No, Chairman, no apologies have been received.
Thank you. And then on to the minutes. We've got 2 sets of minutes in front of us this evening. So the ones from the 13th of March and the ones from the full council where we voted on who was going to be on the new committees. Are there any comments, please, on the first set of minutes? So those are from the 13th of March. Okay, I've got a couple. So I think at the top of the second page, when we talked about the sports hub, it says, since they did not believe that a right of reply had not been given. And I think it should say, since they did not believe that a right of reply had been given. So I think there's an excess not there that needs to come out.
Can you just direct me to the...
Yes.
I believe that one's been corrected, Chairman, already.
Okay.
That might have been a previous draft, I believe.
Let's have a look. That's there. Top of page 8. Okay. So that was the set that was here for me to sign. Okay. Yeah, yeah. Does that make sense to members? Are you happy with that? Yeah, I think it reflects what was actually said. And also there's a comment about libel. I think the way it reads, people might think that the report uses the word libel. So I think we probably just need to clarify that, that a member mentioned the word libel, but it's not in the report, just so that's clear for the record.
Just what page is that, Chairman? Sorry.
Page 8 of the minutes. So in the middle, the paragraph begins, it was felt that the report was extremely well written. It's that paragraph. But it goes on to say they would not have used the word libel. And I just think as it reads, people might think that the report uses the word libel.
I'm just trying to find it on the online agenda. Of the minutes. Well
Point 67
Thank you.
on the second page of that, on big waste.
Yeah, I got it.
They would not have used the word libel.
Yeah, I just think the reading of that paragraph, people might think it's the report that used the word libel as
No, it
opposed
was
to a
me that
member.
mentioned it.
Yeah, so I think we should clarify that a member raised it and it wasn't that people were saying that the report said it.
That's fine.
Yeah, great, thank you. So if we can make those two corrections then, Ms Chard, yeah. Any other comments on the minutes? So if we vote on the first ones then for the 13th of March, can I have a proposer, please? Thank you, councillor Pattenden, seconder. Councillor Reid, thank you. All those in favour? Okay, any against? Any abstentions? Thank you very much indeed. And then the second set of minutes, when we elected members of the committee, so this was a fairly straightforward meeting, that was the 15th of May. Any comments on that? Anyone happy to propose that, please? Councillor McKinnon, seconder. Councillor Cotton, all those in favour? Great. Thank you very much indeed. Any abstentions? Thank you. Pages or something. Delay things. Right, on to actions from previous meetings. Do members have any comments on this, please? I think with items 89 to 91, those have been on the action list for quite a long time now, and they all relate to libraries. Libraries is on our work programme for the meeting in September. So I think it might be a good idea for us to amalgamate those and mention that it is actually coming to the next meeting. Councillor Cotton.
Thank you. Are we talking about the tabulation now, where we're putting the summaries? I'm sorry. Yes, we are. Okay. Yeah, there was a couple of points in amongst those. So I
Okay,
have points
great.
drawings when you're ready.
Okay, thank you, councillor Cotton. So are members happy for us to amalgamate the ones about the library and say that we've got a report coming? Yeah, I am going to have a chat with the portfolio holder for the libraries just to get clarity on exactly what is coming, because I'm very conscious that this has been bounced a few times now. Okay. Councillor Cotton, do you want to make your points?
Yeah, I don't know if I'm rereading it now, thinking maybe I was wrong. Point 156 waste strategy. The words, is there authorities to check the link between affluence and waste volume? It's not effluence in, it is the affluence, is it?
Yeah, so yeah.
It is. Okay.
Yes.
Right.
Yeah, because I think the point was made that we do have a relatively high amount of waste in this district. And there was a concern that perhaps there is a link between affluence in the area and the amount of waste.
Okay.
Yeah, okay.
Thank you, Chair. That's going to be interesting how they develop that theme, I think. Anyway, swiftly onwards. The other point was on the page, next page, 18, I think it was, 157 is waste strategy in looking at litter picking. I know that the town and parish councils get a lot involved with that and they support local groups. I know that in Thatcham they have one. I'm just hope they're taking that on board in their report, that they are looking not necessarily at the town and parishes, but just members of public who are organising litter picking. If you look on the Facebook pages, there are many, and they do it on a monthly or even a more frequent basis. So I hope we're contacting the public who are doing the litter picking as well.
Yes, can we make a note of that and we can go back to Daniel Warren about that? Yeah, thank you.
Chair, but just wondering, maybe expanding that point a little bit further, because there are a number of parish councils that have got their own litter picking kit. So maybe if Countryside was aware of which ones have as a register, and sort of people coming in to Market Street to pick up kit, they could pick one up from their local village hall or village clerk.
Yep. Okay, all right. Thank you, councillor Cotton. Items 116 and 143 regarding pollution of the Northbrook stream. Paula Saunton has contacted me to say that she's meeting Lee Dillon MP about that. Can I propose that we amalgamate those two items and that I seek an update from Paula Saunton and Lee Dillon about their discussion about that? Because again, this is something that has sat on our action log, I think, since we had the special meeting with Thames Water. Yeah, okay.
A
Councillor
question.
Cotton.
We did ask a question several times, I believe, on the ownership of Thatcham Sewage Works, which my understanding is it's been sold on. I know officers did write to them to remind them. Can we just check to see if we have had an answer? And if not, can we make a final stab at it before we maybe refer it up to RMP? Because I'm very concerned. If you looked at the works being done in Woolhampton, I don't know if they were just urgent works, but I mean, they were tankers all the way along the A4 picking up sewage. If something serious happened at the Thatcham Sewage Works, I mean, we've already seen some tragedies where effluent has been spilt into fish ponds and such like. And we're all very conscious, I'm sure, of the spillages into rivers, and the River Kennet being a very primary river of our district. I think we need to know that this is in the hands of a responsible company.
Yeah.
And I really, could ask officers to, if they don't get a reply, is that we drill down on our own, because I think it's a very high risk point, especially the state in which Thames Water are at the moment. You know, something could go wrong, drastically wrong, and then a private company say, "Oh, that's not our problem," and walk away from it, and the residents of the district would have to, and us would have to pick up the pieces. So,
Yeah.
Would request that. Thank you, Chair.
Mr. Child, could you double check that we haven't lost an action point on that along the way? Yeah. Thank you, councillor Cotton. Councillor Reid.
I'd just like to echo that, especially Woolhampton, as that's in my ward. The station road has been destroyed by the tankers. It literally has been destroyed. Tanker also went through the level crossing when the barriers were down, and no legal action was taken against the tanker driver whatsoever. Well, I've got a complaint raised against British Transport Police on that behalf. They told me that the cameras weren't working. There was no witness, but there was a witness, and there are cameras on there. Yes, the duration of it, we've still got tankers going down there. We've been told by Thames Water there's 1 or 2 a day, and actually we've been counting many more than that number per day. So yeah, absolutely, Thatcham should be very worried.
Okay.
Little Woolhampton, but that is just Woolhampton having a problem. Thank you.
Okay. Can we capture that from councillor Reid then and make sure that we cover that off as well? Yeah, thank you. On housing, item 163 and 221 on housing. As members know, I had a conversation with councillors Codling and Gaines about this a little while ago, and we wanted to avoid duplication between Scrutiny and Health and Wellbeing Board. I've had a look at the Health and Wellbeing Board's agendas. They have looked at the implications of the Renters' Rights Bill and the Supported Living Act 2023. And also they have made Councillor Gaines a member of the Health and Wellbeing Board, which is good, so that she can cover off issues that cross over. And they also decided to establish a working group to develop an action plan to respond to the Housing Stock Condition Survey. I also had a conversation with Councillor Gaines last week, and from her perspective as portfolio holder, she thought the most useful thing Scrutiny could do vis-a-vis housing would be to look at social housing and the various challenges around that. So repairs, for example, I've talked to Councillor Amitharaj about the increase in fees. I know there are also concerns from ward councillors about sale of housing and where the proceeds are going to go, because they don't necessarily come back into the district. And also adoption of social housing on new developments. I've heard anecdotally that some social housing associations are not keen to take it on, and then that leaves us with the question of what's going to happen with it. Councillor Reid.
I wonder if you could also add the provision for antisocial behaviour officers that social housing organisations have, and working with the council and with the police.
Can I propose that when we come to work programme, we look at the housing in a bit more detail? Yeah, councillor Amatharaj.
Thank you, Chairman. Just a bit add clarity. It's not anecdotal. I have got evidence in my ward where the housing builders have made applications to convert the affordable housing into the new homes scheme. So we can back it up with evidence.
Great.
I think we can reach out to other planning teams to see if there are any similar ones. Yeah, thank you.
Fantastic. Thank you very much. So if we amalgamate 163 and 221, are members happy with that? And we'll have a chat about housing when we get to work programme. Great. Item 201, Councillor Gawley has written to the Secretary of State regarding Thames Water being a statutory consultee for planning applications. As members of planning committees will know, it's quite frustrating that Thames Water is not a statutory consultee, and we often end up with new developments where insufficient attention has been given to fresh and foul water infrastructure. So I have suggested to Councillor Gawley that if and when he receives a response, he lets us know what that is. Yep. Item 223 on Thames Water, I still have not received a response from them. Whether they're going to respond or not, I don't know. I suggest that we leave it on there as a prompt. Item 229 is with Councillor Amatharaj to have a discussion with Councillor Gawley. Yeah. So I think we can probably close that one off now. Yeah, thank you. Item 232 on waste. I've spoken to officers. They think it would be a good time to do something in the spring or summer next year to examine the impact of the change to the 3 weekly bin collections, which I understand is going to come in the autumn. So they thought it would be timely for us to look at that next spring or summer to see what the impact has been, and also the impact of improvements to curbside recycling as well. So we could cover those off at the same time. But again, we can discuss that under work programme. Councillor Sumner.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I think essential to that is some detailed performance reporting on fly tipping. I know certainly in my area the volume is going up. We're not all getting a favourable response when requests are made to clear it. So, yeah, fairly essential to that whole conversation, I think, if we can, please.
Thank you, Councillor Sumner. Right, so we'll talk about that a bit more under work programme. And then item 235 about recommendation tracker. So this is something we've talked about, I think, at the last couple of meetings about tracking any recommendations that we make to executive that are accepted, but then to check whether they are actually then being implemented, and if they're not, why not, so that we don't lose sight of those things. So officers are working on that at the moment, and we hope that we'll have something in the September meeting. And then item 230, corporate programme schedule. Mr. Childers kindly shared this with members via email. It's not actually on our agenda, but I think it might be worth us adding it as a standing item in future, like we've got the executive forward plan, to actually look at the corporate forward plan as well, if members think that would be a good idea. Yep. Okay. There are some elements in it. I'm conscious it's not on the agenda, but there are some things in it. I'm sure members will have read it. So it talks about many projects, some of which are already overdue. So Councillor Cotton, if I can prevail upon you, if that's not too much trouble, there's something in there about corporate landlord model, which is overdue. Now, I'm conscious that we haven't asked you to prep for this because it's in the action log and not actually on the agenda. So if you want to get back to us about that, I think that would be acceptable.
Will do.
Okay, thank you. And there was something about iTrent, the HR system as well. Again, we can ask Councillor Brooks about that for an update. And there were also some other projects in there around transformation. Turnham Green and care homes were mentioned as overdue, and a couple of IT projects were due to close yesterday. So I think it might be good if we just have that as a standing item in future, and then we can go through it as we do with the exec plan. And transformation is on the agenda for September anyway, so we can cover off some of those issues then. Councillor Sumner.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Just as we've got it in front of us, TCEE 28. Councillor Gould has had a promotion by the look of it. He's down as being deputy leader of council. I'm sure he'd more than capable of doing the job. But I think we've had a swap out there, so we just need to have a check through for members and their respective titles.
Okay, thank you. Great. Okay, any other points on that? No, thank you very much indeed. Changes to scrutiny structure and the creation of the policy development group. So as members know, this is the first meeting of this resources and place scrutiny committee. The scrutiny function was split into 3 at the annual full council, and there are now 3 new scrutiny committees. Now I'm mentioning this for the benefit of the public as well as members here, just so that people know what's changed. So we've got our committee. We've also got Children and Young People Scrutiny Committee, which met for the first time on the 5th of June. Health and Adult Social Care Scrutiny Committee, which met on the 12th of June. I think Children and Young People have got a special meeting on the 15th of July as well. Just to note, the Scrutiny Commission paperwork from previous meetings is still available on the internet. So if you ever need to refer back and find anything, you won't find it on the committee's landing page. You need to select at the top for decommissioned committees. So search for all committees, not just current committees. So if you go looking for something and you think, where's it gone? It's disappeared. It is still all there. Yeah. And obviously there are many years worth of papers there that we can refer back to. There are also resources on the intranet about scrutiny. So if members haven't had a chance to look at those, I would recommend that we all do that and refresh our memories if we're long-standing members. So if you go to the intranet and search for /members-scrutiny-resources, there's quite a lot of information on there that staff have very helpfully put on there for us. Policy Development Group is meeting for the first time tomorrow. So as members know, this is replacing the 3 former advisory groups that we used to have for planning, transport and the environment. And there was some concern about overlap between scrutiny and the new body looking at policy, because as members know, we perform a policy development and review function. So just to reassure members, that is acknowledged in the terms of reference for the Policy Development Group. It acknowledges the scrutiny function and what scrutiny does. And it also says that PDG and scrutiny committee should ensure awareness of each other's work programmes and consider whether there is any issue of duplication. So I think we just need to make sure that we cover that off. So again, perhaps we could have a standing item to just check what Policy Development Group are looking at, and maybe suggest to them that they do likewise, so that they keep an eye on what we're up to. Are members happy with that proposal? Yeah, great, thank you. Good. And I think the other thing to mention, we don't have an oversight and scrutiny commission. So in some councils, you would have committees and then you would have an OSMC above it. And we haven't got that. So I think we need to be mindful of the need for the 3 chairs of the new scrutiny committees to liaise with one another, just to make sure nothing falls down the cracks in the pavement, we don't duplicate work, etc., etc. Because I'm very conscious that for things like special educational needs, high needs block, the Children's Services scrutiny will be looking at that from their perspective, and we will be looking at it from the perspective of the financial challenge that it poses. And we just need to make sure that that's squared off and we're aware of each other's work. So I just suggest that scrutiny chairs make sure they liaise with one another. I don't know if we need to codify that in some way, maybe have a 3-monthly meeting or something of that nature. But I think we can probably take that offline and discuss with officers if members are happy. I just want to make sure we don't duplicate or miss anything. Any questions on that? No, great, thank you. Hopefully that was useful for the public as well, so they know what's happening. Great. Item 5, declarations of interest. Do members have any declarations of interest relating to items on the agenda, please? No. Thank you very much. Any petitions?
Not been made aware of any being presented.
Thank you very much. Right, moving swiftly on. Item 7, capital financing report. Over to Mr. Cottingham. Sorry, Councillor Cottingham.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you very much for this opportunity to present the capital financing outturn for 24-25. With all good reports, I'm actually going to work backwards. And crucial to this report is actually on the last page, which is, it's actually, as I say, the standard diagram which shows the liability benchmark, which shows, are you okay there, Councillor Armitage?
Yeah. It's a spill.
Oh, okay. Do you want to?
Yeah, that's fine.
Okay. So yeah, so what's the chart in appendix, I think it's appendix B on the last page, shows what we need to borrow to finance our capital expenditure, but also to fund the DSG override. It's something which is, I think, been in the press recently, the impact of having to service the high needs block, the off-balance sheet, in essence, requirement which we have, and how the current government have decided to kick the can down the road for another year or so to 27, 28. And you can see that there's quite a tipping point in 28, 29, roughly 29, which shows the fact that, in essence, we won't have enough money to fund our own capital programme. We'll be funding all of our borrowings just to service the high needs block, in essence, the DSG override. That's the place which we find ourselves, and no doubt with a number of local authorities around the country, increasing demand, increasing in unit price, etc. And it's something which we face a systematic issue, as I say, not just for us, but many councils throughout the country. So that is, I suppose, is that the good news or just the realism of where we face ourselves? So working sort of back to front, if you look at within the reports for last financial year, we spent 41 million on capital programme, CapEx, of which was roughly 18 million below our intention. So we achieved around about 70% of the plan. The slippage is due to many factors, potentially our over-ambition. Also, when we are facing cuts in getting the revenue numbers in place, it's one of the first things which we look to, in essence, to turn the tap off regarding agency costs, etc., and getting those capital programs. So we've got a rollover of roughly 18 million into 25-26 for this current financial year. Also, from a capital funding perspective, something which we've debated previously is the weighted average cost of borrowing, as you can see on 4.3. From a long-term borrowing perspective, it's been just below 4%, and the Public Works Loan Board rate is 5.7, 5.73%. So at the moment, we're having short-term borrowing. However, we do have our own internal rules for making sure that short-term borrowing is no more than 30%. So as soon as we hit that, or when interest rates start to fall closer to the weighted average cost of borrowing of 4%, we'll then be getting into the market to borrow at whatever the prevailing rate would be. Hopefully interest rates are going to start to fall. I think we've been saying this for a number of months. You see on slide 5.5, sorry, page 5.5, we've got the itemisation of how that 41 million has been spent throughout the last financial year. Also, we have in page 10 of Appendix A, itemisation of roughly 10 million of the rollover into this current financial year of the balancing item of 7.8 million being projects below 250k. So it gives an indicator of what's happening this current financial year regarding capital expenditure projects. And hopefully we will be a little bit better, delivering more than 70% of our ambition. And as I say, that's sort of a quick summary of the capital financing requirement which we have as a council. But as I say, the coming over the horizon in around about 4 years' time is, to say, the borrowing which we'll need to have to fund the DSG high needs block.
Thank you very much, Councillor Cottingham. Councillor Wollaston.
Thank you, Chairman. Councillor Cotting is well aware of my ongoing concerns about the amount of borrowing that's going on. And I have in front of me here a schedule of everything that's been borrowed over the current financial year, which totals £70 million on top, before we get to the government emergency loan of another £16 million. Now, a number of these are due for repayment. Some have already passed their repayment date. There was one on 15th of May, for example, one on the 17th of July, there's another one in in August and September, all for £5 million each. Firstly, I'd like to know just where that money's been spent. And secondly, I'd like to know how we're repaying it.
So the quirk of exceptional financial support is what we've done is we've in essence borrowed the money already for day-to-day expenditure, but from a revenue accounting perspective, the government are allowing us to capitalise those overheads. So the money's already been borrowed, so there won't be any additional borrowing required for EFS because it's already happened. From an EFS perspective, that is in essence going onto the balance sheet and will then be paid back within the terms of the borrowing. And how we funded, I think within the report we have roughly 59 mil worth of borrowing. Was it that was split equally between external and internal borrowing? I seem to remember. Yeah. Right. So PWB is roughly 41 million, of which short term is 45, and then roughly 20 regarding short term borrowing out of that.
Forgive me, but you haven't actually answered the question. The question was, A, what it's been spent on, and B, how are you going to repay it in a time where we're strapped for cash as an authority, we don't have that money.
So the actual repayment will be part of the long term, as I say, borrowing maturity. So at the moment, it's coming out of the revenue account. So I think you see within the document, it shows you the amount of cost of borrowing coming out of our revenue account, which is part of the, as I say, the schedule which we have regarding from a maturity when we borrow the money. So it's already been accounted for within the revenue account. So as I say, we've borrowed both short term and long term. And the fact that at the moment we do have sufficient funds to actually repay or roll over any maturity of debt which we have. So if you talk about debt which matures from a short-term perspective, we just then go to the market and reborrow again.
So what you're effectively saying is you're just increasing the borrowing that the council has.
If you look at, as I say, if you go to the capital financing graph on the last page of Appendix B, you can then see the borrowing requirement going up within that document. So you can see.
So are you relying on the fact that government will eventually, central government that is, will eventually roll over and say, okay, we accept the fact local authorities can't afford what we're asking them to do, and we'll have to give them an extra load of money?
Yeah, Ms Cairns, Shannon Combs-Slaughter.
That would be lovely. I can't guarantee that would happen. To answer your sort of earlier point, what is the money spent on? It is to finance our capital projects, our day-to-day cash flow and refinancing of any borrowing that has already been undertaken, be it longer term loans that have matured or short-term borrowing with other local authorities. So our borrowing is split between, as Councillor Cottingham said, is split between the PWRB and short-term local authority borrowing. There is no additional borrowing in respect of the EFS allocation. It is an accounting adjustment. And Councillor Cottingham, as he said, it is already sort of essentially financing that is undertaken during the year in the pursuit of our day-to-day activities and our capital programme and our capital refinancing.
Chair, would you forgive one further question? The emergency loan that's been given, what interest rate's being charged on that, and when are we expected to repay it?
Thank you for your question, Councillor Wilson. As I said earlier, there is no borrowing required for this. So the money is already been borrowed to fund the actual spend. So the cash has already been borrowed. EFS does not require us to borrow any further money. So all it's doing is moving from the revenue account to the balance sheet, money which has already been spent and all money which has already been borrowed. It's more of an accounting quirk to capitalise that overhead.
Only a humble surveyor, I'm afraid. I don't understand that.
Shannon Coleman's daughter, I saw your hand again.
Thank you, Chair. Essentially, there is no additional borrowing of £13 million. What the government are allowing us to do is move revenue expenditure into our capital adjustment account, our balance sheet. That's very sort of accounty speak, but essentially what that means, it comes under our capital financing budgets and it is subject to something called MRP. It is not a specific loan in itself subject to a specific interest payment. It is a financing mechanism that is subject to something called MRP, which is a provision that we have to repay over 20 years. But there is no specific £13 million loan, essentially.
Yeah, I saw Councillor Matharaj's hand next.
Thank you, Chairman. Thank you, Councillor Cottingham. I'll just point out to you updates on the expenditure. You mentioned about there's 18.4 million of expenditure which outran, which I would call it as underspent, if I may. So as a project manager, myself, so others, if we have a budget and if we underspend it, it would be taken away. So I'm slightly bit apprehensive that it's not the case. It would be the case, but Councillor Cottingham, you mentioned that it's not. It's going to be reprofiled. Can we get an assurance that those that 18.4 million of the reprofile expenditure budget is going to be spent in the next financial year? Because if you look at the table above, there's a lot of underspent in the areas like climate change, tackling climate change and services, which you're proud of. My question is, I will come to the question, Chairman, is that can we have an itemization of the projects which were profiled or budgeted for and not spent in this financial year? Because I'm pretty sure it will involve all of our wards, and we would be looking to have those projects completed, and now it's not. So that assurance and itemization. And the chart, the graph above, again, Councillor Cottingham pointed out, and I just wanted to highlight that it's not a forecast capital expenditure, isn't it? It's the actual, because the Q1, Q2, Q3, it should be for the 2024-25, it should be the actuals and the comparison we make against 23-24. And if I look at that actuals of 41 million something against the capital expenditure of 23-24, it was 47 million. So for the same, the capital expenditure outrun, it was, compared to last year, it was roughly 6 to 7 million underspent. So what are the specific reasons for this underspend? Is it because the lack of resources, or PMs or financial managers planning big and underachieving, or not able to spend, or not able to find people? Because it's a bit worrying that we are budgeting for and even taking loans for these capital budget expenditure spend, and we're not spending that much. So thank you. That's my question.
Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you for your detailed question, and Councillor Armitage. So in reverse order, there's no borrowing incurred for money which is not spent. So the illusion of us borrowing money in advance does not happen. We only borrow when the actual project is completed, which is paid for. If you go to Appendix A, you have there a list of the reprofiling of projects into 25-26. All I can say, we'll have our best endeavours to complete everything, but not everything is within our control. So a good illustration, the Thatcham Library new build is going to be wrapped around the Community Hub initiative. So we will not be having a new build until that Community Hub project has been completed. It's currently going through feasibility study at the moment on a wider redevelopment of that site. Other elements with regarding solar farms, etc. Again, that is dependent upon us getting the suppliers, the tendering, etc., and resources. The playing pitch strategy is coming to fruition. So again, that's taken a little bit of time to get to conclusion. So there are good reasons why we have ambition, and other reasons why we're not able to execute regarding, as you say, resources which we have internally, but also other items which are outside of our control. But yes, we are here to, as I say, as an administration, to make the lives better of our residents, and the fact that we do want to spend money to especially refurb schools. So on here you have the Castle School needs expanding. You also have special education needs, and also you have IT systems which need to be improved, especially from a finance perspective. And we're well aware of, as I said, that the fact that there is a limited resource regarding project management. This is something which the team are looking to consolidate. And we're also well aware that the local market is quite costly, not least with an employer within West Berkshire who is expanding themselves. So, yeah, we'll do our best endeavours, but I would like it to be closer, above 70% of delivery. And what we're looking to do is have a more robust process of building the capital expenditure programme project, make sure that we are building in those resources and being more credible with our planning.
Thank you, Councillor Cottingham. Thank you, Chairman, for that assurance.
Thank you. Councillor Cottam and then Councillor Pattenden. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. I have a BBC article dated the 30th of June, and I think it's relevant. I mean, as with Councillor Wilston, some of these complex accountancy ways are a bit above my pay grade. I do have a good grip, but not quite up to at that level. So in this BBC article, it's saying that this council will be liable for £38 million in expenditure or debt. So do you agree with them that a lot of these problems we have for finance are to do with what we're trying to do with the send? You know, is all these things, the firefighting, the planning ahead to try and resolve things, is this because we're trying to cope with the unfinanced responsibility of looking after SEND students in this area?
Councillor Cottam. Just by the way, the screen seemed, they're back again. It looked like we were in the middle of the smog for a minute there, did we?
It's all that hot air.
Hopefully people at home can see okay. Sorry, Councillor Cottingham.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Councillor Cottam. Yes, we'll come on to the revenue outturn, but we're seeing a huge increase in the overhead of having to fund the DSG off balance sheet. So we're looking at, I think for next financial year, this roughly 1.5 million extra capital expenditure cost, MLP and interest, etc., just to fund the DSG override. And the fact that what we're seeing is that increase in complexity of needs, increase in the volume, increase in the actual unit cost, also greater awareness of parents of getting what is right for their own children, of also having the ability to select schools outside of the area, specialist school, and we then having to fund the actual travel from outside of West Berkshire into other areas, which is very costly. And it's something which I think the government recognise and need to amend quite quickly, because as I remember, my economics teacher when I was about 14 said to me, as a society, we have unlimited wants but limited means. And this at the moment is we're having to bear the cost of borrowing for something which we don't necessarily have any control of how the money is spent. And it's something which, as I say, as a society, we need to understand that we all want the best for our children, but sometimes we need to ensure that we're getting the best value for residents, for taxpayers across the country.
Thank you, Chair. So you, just in finishing, so that figure of 37 million is, stated by the BBC is a ballpark figure.
We'll come on to that number within the next report. So there is mention of how much it's going to potentially increase. But at the moment, it is a snowball running down the hill, which, is going to cause us quite significant financial pressure from a borrowing requirement. And if the government remove the statutory override, the lady to my left, my 151 officer, will be pressing for, bankruptcy, in essence.
Councillor Cottingham, did you mention earlier the override has already been pushed back by another year, so 2027, that's official from the government?
Yeah, that came out about 3-4 weeks ago.
Okay.
3 weeks ago. Yeah.
So since these papers were written, essentially, I think, yeah, thank you for clarifying. Councillor Pattenden.
Thank you, Chair. Councillor Cottingham, I just wanted to give you some positive feedback that I received from a constituent in Newbury Greenham whilst out delivering recently, and it's regarding the money that's has been spent on carriageway patching, maintaining, improving local road networks. There's been from what he said, and I would agree, there's been some very noticeable resurfacing going on, more than has happened for a very long time, and also painting of white lines. And I would just wanted to pass on his thanks for that.
Thank you.
I'm not sure whether Councillor Sumner or Councillor McKinnon was first. Councillor McKinnon.
Thank you very much, Chairman. Top scrutiny there from Councillor Pattenden. Not sure how, well, I don't know what the pothole KPI and the performance report's going to say about that, but we'll get onto that in a second. Councillor Cottingham, on 5.5, which you referred us to earlier, I don't see any entry at all for the spending on the Faraday Road football pitch. Just wondering if you could tell me why that is.
My perception will be it will be within the projects up to 250k. So there's a line item right at the bottom there. So in the 24-25, so everything else has been itemised, so it must be below £250,000.
Okay, thanks. Do you have an idea at the moment about what the running total is of the total capital spend on Faraday Roads?
Can I come back to you, Al?
Yeah.
We don't have that to hand.
That's fine. And I think my final question here is, looking at the projects which have been bumped into next year. So we're looking at things like the special education, mental health and autism spectrum disorder. So, to me, that sounds like a really important project. What process actually does the executive go through when deciding to prioritise capital funding and council resources into one project or another? Because that would seem to be something that would be fairly pressing and fairly beneficial to a fairly vulnerable cohort in our district.
Totally agree. And as I mentioned earlier, we're reviewing the process of prioritisation of what can we do with the resources we have to make sure that we are prioritising, as you say, the most needy projects which have the biggest impact for us as residents of West Berkshire. And I totally agree that this is something which needs to be at the top of the list.
But would you agree with me that residents might be concerned that the administration has prioritised a project like the Faraday Road football pitch, which has been given a great deal of resources since the administration took power, and has not prioritised something as important as the special education provision?
I will find out why this particular autism spectrum disorder has slipped I'll come back to you to why that has occurred.
Thank you. Councillor Sumner.
Thank you, Chair. Councillor Cottingham, breach of habit, I'm going to go forwards rather than backwards. Just from a presentation formatting point of view, the graph at 4.1 needs improving. You've got text overlaying text on there, so bear in mind this one's coming out to exec, I think, on Thursday. Be useful if that could be addressed as soon as possible. 5.5 has already just been mentioned. I mean, I'm looking at the table, and the obvious thing that struck me is that whilst other projects might all be below 250k, it actually comes in at the highest total value line. So I'm just wondering what level of scrutiny is being applied to those projects. We don't know how many projects there are, but it would seem sensible, with it being a collective 7.2 million, 7.3 million nearly, that is receiving some focus. Is that the case?
Yeah, I think what would be good, thank you very much, Chair, thank you, Councillor Summer, that we can have that itemised in readiness for Thursday. I think that will help us, that you have 2 bites of the cherry to look at that as well. So I think it was probably just for the ease of presenting, but I think from a transparency perspective, it would be good to see all of the projects within that 250.
Yeah, brilliant. Thank you. And finally, from me, Chair, if I may, was the as you mentioned, the final graph, and in particular the date that we're looking at crossover there, because of course there are other things that are going to be quite critical at that time as well, not least of which the shape of the new authority. So I'm just wondering at what point you start to look at the wider piece, to look at what the other authorities' position is, and start to work together to try and manage that and address the situation.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Councillor Sommer. I think one of the challenges we're going to face there is that within the scope of the 2 local authorities, which from Oxfordshire, they don't have adult social care and children and family services. So we would have to extract potentially that information from another authority. So it would be a certain amount of guesswork, but I think, yes, there is good reason to actually then almost estimate what it would be based upon this particular chart. It would be a best guess, but sometimes a best guess is better than nothing.
Thank you. Thank you, Chair.
Just as a supplementary to that, can I ask, do we know when we will expect to get that information from the other councils? Presumably we've got quite detailed plans about all the information we need and when we're going to get it.
Thank you, Chair. I've been advised we're looking to do that work currently. So to do what's that plan of what it's going to look like, which then will have, I suppose, part of the devolution assessment, the part of evidence we have to submit to government as well. We have to submit that evidence. So no doubt there'll be questions from Whitehall.
Sorry, just to come in, Chairman, the information that we have to provide is prescribed. We have to provide evidence around financial sustainability. We are commissioning some external support to assist with that kind of assessment, and that will be the 3 proposals that are being put forward for reorganisation in Oxfordshire, 2 of which include West Berkshire. So that is in hand. I think we're intending to come to scrutiny in September, and we are in the process of collating an awful lot of information. And I think it was mentioned earlier, the amount of engagement that is currently ongoing to try and obviously obtain all of that feedback from partners and residents.
So will that include information from Oxfordshire, who offer adult and children's services then? Will they give us a sort of ballpark figure? Yeah, I'm seeing heads nodding. Yeah, okay. Thank you for that clarification. Great. Councillor Reid.
Councillor Cottingham, I was just wondering on Appendix B, people have heard me speak before, are kind of interested in risk and controls and various other things. So I'm seeing this thing called a liability benchmark, indicating whether we're likely to be a long-term borrower or a long-term investor. Can you put that a little bit more in language that residents and non-accountants are more likely to understand? You know, what is the value of this? I believe it looks like a financial control, additional financial control.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Councillor Reid. In essence, what it's doing is showing how much money, how much money we can afford to borrow. We touched on this earlier, meaning how much can we afford to then pay back regarding interest at MLP and where that money is going to be spent. And what the chart over the page is showing is come 28, 29, the money which we can afford to, which is a solid line, is going to be exceeded by the funds which we are needed to fund just the high needs block. So in essence, all of our borrowing will be spent on funding the DSG override. So we will not be able to borrow any capital financing to fund capital projects in West Berkshire.
Okay, thank you for that. Just going a little bit in reverse, I'm not as logical as Councillor Sumner, unfortunately. If I do home accounts, then I bundle everything in together, the cost of my credit cards, cost of the mortgage, what's the income, etc., have I got any assets? And then my wife will peer over my shoulder and wonder if we can get a summer holiday. And I understand we have to keep capital and revenue separate. Those are the rules. That's how accounting works. But I think residents also would be interested from that 6.2. What the cost for this financial year for financing the 353 million?
If you go back to the weighted average cost of borrowing, just under 4%, so multiply 350 million by 4%, there you've got roughly 14 million. That's just from a interest perspective. But on top of that, you've then got MLP, which is around about 4 mil, maybe a bit more. So if you, as I say, if you've got the amount of which we're borrowing, multiply that by the weighted average cost of borrowing, which is roughly 4%, which is, as I say, roughly around about 14 million just from an interest perspective. And then on top of that, you've got MLP.
Okay, so
13.4 million for MLP. So that's cost for in total.
Okay, so the cost of my credit card, my revolving debt, or whatever it is about 14 million for the year.
Yeah, so the actual amount, if you go to the revenue account, it further on within the next report shows you the amount of capital financing. So I wasn't too far off by saying 14 million, which includes an MLP. So if you go to the next report on to page 18, you have the number there, which is 13.4 million.
Brilliant. Okay,
Yep.
Thank you very much.
Great. Any more questions, colleagues? No. Right, I've got a couple myself. Page 2, it talks about additional spend on the social care case management system, which has gone up from £960,000 to 1.37 million. Are you able to shed any light on why that has happened, please?
Thank you, Chair. I can. I asked this question earlier myself. So what we're doing is we're going external with regarding extra requirements, which we don't have the resource internally to be able to deliver. So we're actually having to go to external consultants to actually deliver the additional requirements to the actual social care package.
Because I think this is a bit of a danger for some of our projects, isn't it, that we have to go and get extra consultancy in. Is the council making efforts to make sure that we don't have to do that?
I think If I rewind a little bit, I think we're well aware of the issues which we faced with Care Director and what happened there, and the fact that integrated IT projects are notoriously fraught with risk and danger. And if you do not get the appropriate expertise in, you can leave yourself with a system which isn't fit for purpose. So we're very conscious of the need to make sure we are spending our residents' money, taxpayers' money wisely. But I think sometimes it can be a false economy trying to do things in-house when you don't have the resources to do so.
Councillor Reid.
Hopefully we'll find out more about that in the task and finish group that's coming along. But I think that's a very good lesson for us as a council, not to expect overworked officers to do lots of tasks on the side of the desk. And actually we need to be much more practical up front with our projects and put a lot more risk in the fact that we are going to have to bring in external resource rather than expecting officers to do more and more extra personal hours just to keep projects afloat.
And can I just also add to this? Later on in the next report, we actually see a pressure which has manifested itself in this last financial year with regarding an IT system which didn't follow due corporate governance. So as I said, it can be a false economy trying to do things outside of a robust process. So we can cover off that later with it this evening.
Okay. Thank you, members. Shall we move on to the revenue item? Yep. Okay, great. Thank you. Over to you again, Councillor Cottingham.
Thank you very much, Chair. So we're now on to, as I say, the revenue account, which for our residents is in essence is where their council tax bill is spent. As we know, we've had increasing pressure in 24-25, which required us to have exceptional financial support of 13 million, which in reality was moving that 13 million from the revenue account to the balance sheet. As I say, try to explain what the movement is. If you go to, as I say, page 18, you have a detailed analysis of where the money has been spent. First of all, there is a little typo on page 17, 4.1. It shows 165.2, it should be 164.6. So if you go to the analysis of how much the budget was, right in the first column on page 18, that's the 164.6. So including the DSG override, we were 16.6 million over, of which there is a reconciliation. You can see the DSG excluded from that. So from a general fund perspective, what has happened is the general fund opening balance was roughly 6.8 million. 4.2 million of which we've overspent by 6.8 million, meaning that we're going to finish the year with a reserve of roughly 10.6 million. So the 13 million has been used to replenish our reserves up to an amount which the 151 officer feels more comfortable with at the level. So as I say, it's there to make sure that we're protected going forward. But ultimately, as you can see by the actual increase in costs, the significant increase has been in the children social care area. Adult social care was only 0.5% above budget, whereas we have quite a significant increase in children social care, very much driven by increase in number of units, number of children we're having to come into care, and also the unit cost. So typically we've seen an average increase for children in care homes going from £6,000 per week to £8,000 per week. Significant increase, but also an increase in volume. We've also seen an increase in home to school transport of an additional pressure of £1 million, and also agency costs for educational psychologists. And I mentioned earlier with regarding how an IT system can be, which is poorly implemented can drive additional cost. If you go to page 20, item 4.15, we've had an additional pressure in last financial year of 650k with regarding housing benefit. The fact that the system was put in place, wasn't properly interfacing with Regresso, wasn't being properly reconciled. The fact that when the reconciliation was performed, about 4 or 5 years later properly, we found a hole. The fact that from a housing benefit perspective, what we were thinking should have been charged to the revenue account was understated by 650k. Obviously, these individuals who've effectively been overpaid, maybe the right word, are vulnerable people. So the chances of us going back retrospectively to reclaim this money is probably, it's probably something which we will not be able to recover back. And it may be, as I say, as an administration, we may take the decision not to pursue this debt. Interestingly, also from a finance perspective, we've had high dependency on agency for specialist positions. The fact that there is a shortage of qualified accountants in the public sector. You may be able to link this back to the abolishment of the Audit Commission. Our current chief executive, that's where he was trained. That source of resource is no longer available. Having people from the private sector is quite rare. So Officer Shannon, my 151 officer, is an exception coming from the private sector. Doesn't happen too often. And as I say, the fact that we're facing constant pressure to make sure we are maintaining a balanced budget. And the biggest issue which we're facing, as I said, is from a children and family services perspective. And we're doing as much as we possibly can to put preventative control in place. There could be an argument this is legacy of COVID coming through the system of children who obviously were born in that period, having more needs, and also the fact that parents are more aware of what their rights are, the fact that there is greater understanding of what they can have and place demands on us. And we don't want to be fighting through the courts, our residents. We do want the best for our own children, but it does cost money. And as I say, from my perspective, the government need to address this by, there is no regulation in this area. A lot of the children homes are funded by venture capitalists, sovereign wealth funds, with extraordinary profit margins. And the fact that we have this year investing in the commissioning department to be able to get better value for money from this area and increase the expertise and awareness of what we should be commissioning to make sure we're getting best value or, as I say, getting the right programme of support for our children.
Thank you very much for that, Councillor Cottingham. Members, do you have questions? Councillor Sumner.
Thank you, Chair. First one again is presentation on 1.4. We've got what I perceive to be a typo. You've got central government have provisional agreed. It's either provisional agreement, given provisional agreement, or provisionally agreed. Semantics, I know, but needs to be correct in your report. I'm quite intrigued on 2.1 about negative reserves. I don't see how we can have negative reserves over a budget overspend. Surely it's a budget overspend. Reserve is a reserve and it's there to be used when it's needed to be used. I don't really understand. I'm not an accountant, but I don't understand how you can go into a negative into a what is in effect a separate purse. And finally on 4.18, he's so desperately trying to get to it. the inclusion within the 24-25 budget of income which has been lost due to a property being sold off, that feels a little bit basic, dare I say. And I wonder what has been done or what should be done to make sure that we don't have a repeat of that if there's a continued move to sell off properties. I mean, 477k in the grand scheme of things, it's not huge, but actually when you take it as a separate line, it sort of is. Just your thoughts on that and how that can be addressed going forward, please.
Councillor
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Councillor Summers. So I'll go backwards. So the 477k is to do with the disposal of Northallerton, and that happened virtually on the last day of the financial year of 22-23. Was it 23-24? So when the budget was passed for 24-25, it was on our books. So we didn't budget for an event which wasn't certain to occur. Because what happened was the actual offer came in right at the last moment. And as you know, regarding the budgetary timetable, which is passed in February, it went in the budget because, as I say, it wasn't certain we were going to sell that asset. So that's the reason why it went in.
Can I just come back in on that then? Does that mean you were pushing through the sale a little bit too eagerly, and actually looking at the timing of it, it would have been better to just hold back momentarily and allow things to go through the motions that they would normally go through?
No, so what happened was that that sale generated a capital receipt which allowed us to allocate transformation funding. So from a revenue accounting perspective, the hit would have been greater on the P&L in 23-24.
Okay, so you were aware of this issue pretty early on then?
Which issue is that?
Well, the fact that you've got an income which isn't an income anymore.
Well, the actual loss of income crystallised when the disposal of the asset occurred. So from a budgetary perspective, is any budget you put together of what you know. So it was a known when we were going to sell. So that asset could have been sold depending on the actual when the transaction occurred. And I know the legal team and property worked through the night to make sure that it hit the financial year of 23-24.
Okay, I'm less concerned about the phrase known than I am about the phrase unknown in unknown knowns. So one to be very mindful of that in conversations about any future sell-offs, we need to be absolutely sure, council needs to be absolutely sure, the public and our residents need to be absolutely sure that there is a wider effect than just money coming in from sell-off.
Yeah, and within that, that's just the cash out with regarding the loss of the income, but offset against that will be, as I say, the reduction in requirement and borrowing money from the capital, from external capital as well. So there would be, that's just, as I say, the loss of the income doesn't necessarily reflect the actual true net impact, because we would have saved both interest payment and MRP by getting that capital receipt into our bank account.
Okay, final one on this point, if I may, Chair, sorry. Is that the only income loss associated with that sale?
I believe so, but also on top of that, we would have to be providing a sinking fund by maintaining the assets. So that 477 is the income loss, but who's to say we might have had to invest £250,000 if the asset needed some emergency repair work or other aspects regarding EPC, for example. So that's just giving you a straightforward assessment from an income perspective, but not giving you the full picture of potentially what the net impact.
Okay, and as my grandma used to say, if fifth and hands was pots and pans, there'd be no need for tinkers. But I thank you for your response.
Yeah, and as I say, the capital receipt was then used to offset transformation, which had a greater impact on the accounts for 23-24. So how much did we assigned for transformation over that capital receipt?
I would have to get that.
And look, my gut instinct, it would be greater than the 477. So it actually had a positive impact.
Okay.
Councillor McKinnon and then Councillor Amatharaj.
Thank you, Chairman. Just building on Councillor Sumner's point there, you say that the property was sold on the last day of the financial year, which is the 31st of March. The budget's passed at the end of February, start of March. It's about 4 weeks before. It is beyond credulity that PIB and the executive would not have known that this sale was likely to go through either immediately before the start of the financial year or very soon into it. So I think Councillor Sumner's point about this being a very imprudent budget item is perfectly valid. I have to say that. And I've heard you talk about MRP there, Councillor Cottingham. 4.18 struck me as being very, very interesting when I read this. The income loss demonstrates the significant revenue benefit that some of our investment buildings generate to support the delivery of our services. The Property and Investment Board are currently reviewing assets to determine which ones should be offered for sale and which should be retained for the valuable yield they contribute to the council's revenue budget. Now, is that not what Councillor Williston and myself have been saying to you and the executive for the last 2 years? And is that paragraph in a report which bears your name at the top of it a direct repudiation of your strategy to divest all of the commercial property?
Right. So, thank you very much, Chair. Thank you, Councillor McKinnon. I would also add section 7.8 to it as well. So this report has been written from an accounting perspective, and as Councillor Williston knows, being part of the Property Investment Board, we're getting into realms of discussing geopolitical risk regarding the likelihood of our rents being paid, rents having to be renewed, and currently the Department of Local Government and Communities are advising that where a particular local authority is EFS, that commercial property, other property assets are retained, which are delivering financial yield. My own personal opinion, this is my own personal opinion, is the fact that there is significant amount of time and resource from officers and members spent on something which is generating roughly £1 million worth of bottom line benefit currently. But who's to say whether that's going to happen in a year, 2 years' time? As Councillor Wilson knows, a number of our properties are coming to the end of their initial leases, and we've been told by our advisors that we may have to be entering into rent-free periods. We may have to be investing into these particular assets to make sure that they are EPC compliant, sinking fund, etc. So the £1 million is not guaranteed. And I go back to the point over as the compound increase in our own budgets become, the £1 million becomes less of a proportion of the total amount which we spend as a local authority. So in a year's time, it'll be roughly, as I say, it'll be 0.5% of our total spend. And as I say, we spend a significant amount of time, which arguably is not part of our core purpose of delivery, of delivering services to the residents of West Berkshire. It does deliver, as I say, a financial benefit, but arguably the amount of time, and then we're discussing it now, is, from my perspective, as I say, isn't, as I say, it causes so much time and, as I say, resource to be able to assess issues which are outside of our control.
Councillor Cottingham, don't worry about the time we're spending discussing it now. That's why we're here as a scrutiny commission, I would think. I'm actually amazed at the presentation you've just presented there, because it is in direct contravention to the words on this report. You refer to paragraph 7.8. 7.8 backs up 4.18. a balance must be struck between the lure of a one-off capital receipt, the lure, which could potentially fund some additional transformation spend in the short term, versus the long-term revenue streams we might be sacrificing, which, under current PWB restrictions, cannot be replaced. All rental income sacrifice will need to be replaced with income generation or savings proposals to offset the lost revenue stream. Paragraph 7.8 and paragraphs 4.18 explicitly criticise the disposal of this property. Now, Councillor Sumner said a loss of 477k, it's not too big. It's all relative. I mean, it's big enough. I mean, that's how much did we save from closing the 3 resource centres? Remember when the staff were all here during the council meeting? It was all quite powerful. It was about 538k. Well, the income from this would just about covered that. So I don't think it's insignificant at all. And your presentation here, Councillor Cottingham, it's your name at the top of this report, completely contradicts the wording. So let me ask you directly, and if we could have a brief answer, that would be nice. Are you now considering retaining some commercial property assets? Because 4.18 would indicate you are, 7.8 would indicate you are. I think we need to know what the executive's thinking.
So I repeat, the report is being written from a risk perspective. The fact that we have to, as I say, this loss of income will need to be either found or savings within the actual revenue account.
I appreciate it may have been written from a risk perspective, so I'm just asking a direct question now. Is the executive's position now to potentially retain some of these assets?
At the moment, as I say, we have a programme of disposal, which we've spoken at the last property investment board, and those properties will be disposed over a period between 3 to 4 years.
Again, forgive me, Chairman, that is not an answer to the question. Is the executive still intending to sell all of the commercial property assets? Not some, but all.
That's my understanding.
Thank you, Councillor Cottingham, for that direct answer. And Chairman, one more from me on this different topic. I'm going back to the column, I think it's in 4.3, the budget versus actuals. And again, these might not look like the most significant elements of the overspend, but they are quite striking in percentage overspend. If you have a look at the executive director place line, so the budget there was 81,000. The net expenditure was 239,000. That's nearly 3 times what the original budget was there. Executive director resources, 415,000. Budget actual 861,000, more than double. And then chief executive 577,000. Actual spend 895,000, nearly double. What's going on there?
So within the executive director for resources, the significant element increase of that is the external audit fee, which I think more than doubled. Off the top of my head, I don't know. Shannon will come back to find out what has caused that increase.
So just to clarify, you think it was the external audit fee for the executive director for resources?
Correct, yes.
Okay.
Partially. Again, we can come back to.
Yeah, I may be able to give you that figure now, but I think that is substantially the entirety of that overspend.
So place is 3 times the budget. Chief executive nearly double.
Yeah, there's also overspend for transformation of 348,000, finance, property, procurement, 1.8 million. So there's quite significant overspends there. Could we have an action for Councillor Cottingham maybe to come back with a bit more detail on that? Would it be practical to do so ahead of exec, or at least be able to answer those questions at exec?
I would thought so, yes.
Because I'm conscious members of this committee will presumably be at executive and will be able to get an answer then. Thank you. Councillor Amatharaj, thank you for your patience.
No problem. Thank you, Chairman. I'll bring back our discussion to the social care overspend. I think it should be understandable and it should be a non-partisan approach in terms of understanding the overspend, because we all agree there is pressure, and I think it should be commendable for the executive as well as the administration, Councillor Contingham and the officers to deal with that overspend because it's not under our control. So that's understandable. But what I'm trying to come to is that your point being that reining on the cost from the overzealous, the companies making money out of this. What would be the likely savings, or let's call it reining on their cost to minimize the overspend in the next financial year? In terms of, are we looking at numbers in terms of this 2.2 million in terms of those overspend coming from the pressures on the children's services alone, actually providing those services, or just the cost by the companies? They just how we are looking at it.
So we had a proposal come to exec for best to say from Anne-Marie Dodds' area for commissioning. And I must admit, I can't remember the exact details of the payback and the investment, but my memory serves me. I think the payback was going to be very, very soon. Was it in the region of £1 to £2 million, which we felt we could? Yeah, I'd have to come back to you, Councillor Matrajo, over the exact detail of the business case. But as I say, we discussed it. There's no one else from exec here who remember the details, but it was about 3 months ago. Seem to remember around about, yeah, February, March time. So yes, it's something which we're looking to invest this current financial year 25-26 to improve our effectiveness in commissioning by beefing up that team to having more experience and expertise, and also more resource to be able to cover when we are having to place children into care or specialist packages. In the past, we have just been in a queue with a call centre and been told, you're next in line, you either take it or leave it.
Thanks, Councillor Contingham. I think that's reassuring to the committee as well as for the public who are listening in, because it's not just about absorbing all the additional pressures, it's also looking at ways to rein in on the cost. And as you're saying, the indicative figure of 1 million or above any figure of that one would kind of save 50% of the overspend or avoid the overspend, isn't it?
Sorry, has someone got their mobile on? All right, thank you.
Sorry, if that's what I was mentioning, that if that is realized, that savings is realized, it would really give us that the additional savings, or in terms of overspend pressure, ease of the pressure. So that's very reassuring to know. And if we can get those details for the next, not next one, but at least in the forthcoming one, so public will also know that how much of effort is being made. So thanks, Councillor Contingham.
Councillor Wollaston.
Thank you, Chairman. I couldn't agree more that it's a non-partisan approach, Councillor Hammond. It's interesting to note in the previous administration, the opposition at the time didn't take that view at all.
Sorry, I can't speak for that because I was not there, but yeah.
Okay, any other questions? I've got a few, right, thank you. Councillor Cottingham, we mentioned earlier, I think in the capital discussion, that we didn't anticipate any more EFS. In paragraph 1.4 of the revenue paper, right at the bottom of that paragraph, it says the final determination of the council's required EFS will be subject to external review. Are we anticipating that EFS for this current financial year might go up?
Thank you, Chair. So for the previous financial year 24-25, The request for 13 million will be subject to an independent external audit, which no doubt we probably have to pay for. We do. And do we know who's providing that? Just finalising at the moment. So they'll be going through our numbers to make sure that our request is genuine, which then give us the green light to, as I say, capitalise that amount of money from the revenue account to the balance sheet. That then will then give us an opening position of roughly 10.6 million from reserves perspective for 25-26. We have a further 3 million requested of EFS for this current financial year. However, as we talked about earlier, the headwinds which we're facing regarding adult social care, children and family services, the likelihood of having further EFS, I can't rule that in or rule it out. I think potentially once you're into EFS, it's not the easiest to get out of. I think we're well aware of the funding which has been cut from central government for local authorities, and the fact that, as I said earlier, we're being asked to do more with less, and the fact that it's becoming increasingly more difficult to balance the books with the financial pressures which we face in those two main areas of social care.
Thank you very much for that. Just looking through my notes. 2.1D, about transformation funding. I think transformation funding has been raised a few times this evening, and also about the disposal of assets and potential lost income as a result of that. Bearing in mind we've got transformation on the agenda for September, I think it might be quite good if we had a little bit more information about that area, the stuff dotted around in the papers, and maybe get a little bit more clarity on the income for that area, what's being spent, the sort of opportunity cost of offloading assets and using them for that programme, et cetera, just in a sort of easy to understand set of information for members for that next meeting. I'm conscious Miss Mancini's with us as well. I think that would be quite useful. Yeah, Councillor Cottingham.
Yes, thank you, Chair. There's an area which we've gone through with a bit of a fine tooth comb after Councillor McKinnon highlighting the fact that we could have been a little bit too aggressive in coding up programmes regarding transformation. So we've actually gone through making sure that we are complying with the accounting rules, that it is generally transformation programmes which have been assigned to that 2.8 million, 2.9 million. It is something which, so Councillor McKinnon is well aware of the fact that there can be, people can be a little bit too positive in the way in which they code up revenue expenditure as being capital expenditure, making sure there is a robust description and adherence to the relevant accounting rules in this area.
Okay.
So yeah, we've already done that pre-work to make sure that we are comfortable that we haven't pushed the envelope.
Okay, because I'm conscious that the care homes and the resource centres that we've also mentioned earlier are part of that programme. And the care home transfer contract was going to be awarded 1.5 million was the savings target. So is all of that information going to be captured into, you say you've gone through it all, the fine tooth comb, is all of that going to be captured in one place for our understanding at the next meeting?
So the care homes in 4.6 is slightly different. It is the fact that we did have the intention to dispose of the care homes, but we've yet to identify a third party who will take them off our hands. So hence we have an extra overspend of 1.3 million regarding having care homes still within our control, which has additional agency fees. We don't have the economies of scale to be able to, as Bupa has regarding getting coverage of staff, having those two care homes means that when we do have staff shortages, we're reliant on getting agency staff in.
Have we got a timescale for when we anticipate that will be completed? Are we going out to tender again, or?
care homes. So it's apparently later this month, we're now in July, the paper coming, and then when next stage of marketing, remarketing those care homes out. There's a paper coming to executive briefing. So yeah, we haven't forgotten about it. It is something, but obviously we have to make sure when we're doing our due diligence, we're getting the best price, but also most importantly, the quality of care is not diminished in any way.
Okay, thank you. An executive briefing is executive plus senior management team, is that correct? Yeah, fabulous.
Yes.
Just so we know the governance process. Thank you very much for that. And a number, I think 7.3, a number of different boards are mentioned. I'm conscious that it could be getting a little bit complicated about who's doing what. So we've got Financial Review Panel, Capital and Asset Group, Property Investment Board, Finance and Governance Group. I wonder if we could ask for this committee to be given some sort of organogram or diagrammatic representation of how all of these different boards fit in together. I think it might help us to understand the decision-making and governance process.
Yeah, thanks, Chair. What I would say is that the Financial Review Panel has the scope of it with the new 151 officers changed slightly. So we're actually moving into more sort of our own internal scrutiny of the various functions, teams within, as I say, within the council.
Okay, thank you.
I think it's just worth adding that the additional governance and effects, we have reviewed all of this in light of the request for EFS. So clearly we are now in the position where we are in receipt of that, which means that we need to be able to demonstrate that we have appropriately robust processes in place. So we have reviewed that financial governance. And when you hear the kind of comments around ensuring that we are doing everything to ensure that transformation funding is being applied correctly, that we are kind of securing return on kind of planned investment. And so all of that is being bolstered, I think, to ensure that we are able to demonstrate to government that we are managing our finances in a robust manner.
Okay, great. Thank you for that reassurance. But yeah, if we could have some sort of diagrammatic representation, I think it would just really help us. Thank you. I see heads nodding. Thank you for that. Councillor Reid.
Councillor Cottingham, obviously the revenue figures are not stunning. You know, if it was a private company, you'd be somewhat worried, I think. What concerns me is obviously the long-term viability. You know, as a council, we're looking to obviously make savings and transformational savings. That transformational often takes a lot of capital up front to be able to do that, and you need to be able to finance that transformation. I think and I think this suspect will be your personal opinion. Obviously, with the new unitary authority that's being dictated by Westminster, this sounds like a good thing that's going to be happening to us over the next 3 to 4 years. I mean, what are your opinions if we were asked to fund transformation ourselves over 4 to 5 years?
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Councillor Reid. So obviously from a back office perspective, you get economies of scale. So typically accounting, you don't need 3 times the number of people in finance. All you're doing is you're just putting a slightly bigger number into a spreadsheet. So there'll be certain services which, as I say, from a back office perspective, you won't, as I say, you'll get economies of scale. What's also really key is exploring AI. What we don't really know, and we've discussed this earlier, is going to be the penetration rate, I would say, of children needing care, SEND, special needs, over school and transport. Will we get better purchasing power by, as I say, going from just under 200 million local authorities to 600 million? Will we have a wider spectrum of being able to get contracts at cheaper rates? As I say, being able to build greater expertise because you have a more, how to put it, career path rather than working for a smaller unitary. You're going to be working for, in essence, a tier one unitary. I think it's been said that when Berkshire was split into six or five, they were going to be too small many years ago. It wasn't the right thing to do. You were losing that scale. As I say, the unknown to us is going to be the volume plus what can we do to drive the unit cost down. Also, as I say, the access to adult social care regarding care homes. Again, can we get a better contract with Bupa? Can we get a better contract for our waste collection? I think we're well aware we have one of the highest waste collection contracts in the country through the PFI contract. So there'll be lots of scope for us to improve our unit cost by, as I say, having that greater purchasing power to be able to drive down cost. But in essence, if you look at our modus operandi, what our core purpose is, in reality, adults is social care, waste collection is along, those are in essence really the primary services within the 500 which we provide along with planning. And as I say, if you look at the business model for councils, it's all about building new homes and council tax. And one could argue that we haven't had the same level of expansion, let's say what's happened in South Oxfordshire regarding Didcot and their increase in their council tax base by building new homes. So what we'll see is that those two councils potentially do have a higher degree of council tax income as a proportion of their total income and less reliance on other areas of finance, as we discussed earlier, for example, commercial property.
Thank you for your thoughts on that. Thank you.
Councillor Coyle.
Thank you, Chair. Councillor Cottingham, it's just hopefully just very brief question on paragraph 2.1b about the public health grant underspend. I just wondered, I appreciate that councils are able to carry this across and that there would be future contingencies that might require there to be reserves. I just wanted to check that we're confident of our position in relation to our future grants not being reduced because of underspending, because I can see that there are reserves already. I don't know how large how significant the reserves are entitled to be.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Councillor Cole. That's a very good question. I think we're well aware that the government are looking to cut as much money from central government. You just have to look at what's happening today regarding the PIP benefits as such. I wouldn't be surprised that they're looking to cut as much money as they possibly can to local authorities and place the burden on local authorities to fund their expenditure through council tax. So I don't know. Honestly, I don't know. And
I suppose it's
a
just
risk.
my understanding would be that the risk was greater if there had been underspends in previous years, and I just wondered whether you might know the answer right now, but how often there have been significant underspends.
I don't know. I'm looking to Shannon. I know that clearly there is a lot of work at the moment to address kind of suitable means to deploy that public health funding. So I think we have lots of services that would benefit from a kind of prevention approach, and that is what we are now looking at actively. And there is a board now that sits to look at those opportunities, and actually in keeping with the conversations that we've been having about transformation, to review on an ongoing basis how that's been deployed. Do they remain our priorities for investment? But there are clear parameters that the Director of Public Health has to be satisfied that we are meeting those health-related kind of requirements in deploying that spend, so we can't use it for kind of general service provision. So I don't know whether Shannon had anything else.
Thank you. I mean, we have had some underspends, but again, as has been said, we are looking at how we are deploying that grant at the moment. So we are maximising the usage of it across the council to try and protect it moving forward.
Thank you. Any more questions, members? I think we've probably captured quite a lot of information there, Mr. Chard. Great. Good. Thank you very much for a very interesting discussion on that. So I'm conscious that we're spending quite a lot of time on this, but I think it is extremely important. And obviously it's going to be going through executive in 2 days' time, so it's important that we address this. Performance report. I understand, Councillor Cottingham, you're going to deal with this one in Councillor Brooks's absence.
I am. So what I'm going to do, rather than highlight anything in here, I'll let the committee go straight into the detail.
Any questions, colleagues? Councillor Reid.
I think it would be good for the residents to hear why the current executive administration has made a decision to have things either green or red. There doesn't seem to be yellows or oranges in there or ambers. It seems to be a pass or a fail on many of these things. So, number of council services functions digitised and or transformed, 24 out of 28. Not achieved, red. If I was in a private organiser, a company, I'd be going, that's an amber.
So it's all to do with the methodology which we chose to actually represent the progress. So yeah, we've gone quite a binary way. I know there's many ways of representing. You have the RAG status, red, amber, green, brag, blue, red, amber, green. The fact that the methodology we want to have in place is quite challenging. The fact that if we don't hit something, we're putting it as red, even though you could arguably it would be amber, but it gives a little bit more of a, as I say, binary view of the way in which we are assessing our progress.
So I'm really hearing that you've set yourself quite a high challenge there, and that bar is set very high in the high jump. Okay.
Yeah.
Mr. Clark wanted to come in and make a
I
point.
was just going to say, I don't know whether Councillor Reid has seen paragraph 5.9 explains that the kind of methodology or the kind of level of that testing. So where we have or how we have set those benchmarks and RAG ratings is detailed there. And there are a couple of ambers noted in the report, but it's in one of the appendices. I think it is fair to say that the threshold is still fairly high though. So things that we're well on the way to doing might be RAG rated red. But yes, so that explains it there. So if members of the public want to see, that's the answer.
Can I just also add, Chair, is that we had a review on the 15th of May for Q1. We're going to be, as I say, not as hard on ourselves as this sort of off the cliff showing red. So there may be a little bit more sort of amber for the Q1 report, but we're on our way.
Brilliant. Thank you very much. I think the residents will be glad to hear that actually it's potentially not looking as red as I would say. There is plenty of green to be talked about, but obviously people's eyes focus on the red.
Councillor Sumner.
It's an interesting one because I struggle to see the colours. On the next meeting when Councillor Macro's having the same conversation as me, we'll look at each other and we'll nod and go, we'll do the best we can. So I'm reliant on the wording, and I find either succeeded or achieved from what I can see seems to be coming up with the same colour. Well, succeeding means it's ongoing. That's amber. That's not green. Succeeded is green. Achieved is green. And I'm concerned about what I think I just heard, which is that we'll make it look a bit prettier by reducing some of the reds that are on there. Rather than make it look pretty, make it look accurate. It's either a yes or it's a no if you're looking at it in a binary fashion. You've either achieved it or you've not achieved it. And there was one in particular that I noticed where I think it was the master plan, pending confirmation, target TBC. It's a 24-25 report. If it hasn't got a target date on it yet, it's failed. Or it shouldn't be in the 24-25 report, or you set it for a future date. It seems to be that every time we get this report at the moment, it's difficult to track it back to the last one, because it might as well be a completely different report. The approach to it, the way that it's presented, is materially changing, I think, from presentation to presentation. And it does make, I can understand where we're trying to develop, and we're on this side of the bench, we're as happy to contribute to that conversation as I'm sure you would be on the other side when we were administration. In fact, I seem to remember the leader did offer quite a lot of conversation at that point. I'm trying to be positive about what the authority is doing, because I'm not looking at this as being a purely political representation, but it has to be accurate, and there's no point in making it look pretty to please residents if, when they look out of the window, it doesn't reflect what they're seeing. I think that is my concern, Chair.
Councillor Cottingham.
Thanks, Chair. Thanks, Councillor Summer. Yeah. So part of the process, obviously, from Q1, you're resetting a lot of these targets. Some of them do roll over. These particular performance review areas of being what we, as I say, has been selected as how we wish to measure the performance against these stretch targets. I think, yes, it's actually a valid feedback, the fact that I've been able to track quarter by quarter where we're going, what the direction of travel is, gives more, as I say, insight into the reader of how we're performing, because it's not meant, it's not in isolation. So I think, yes, taking that feedback of how the tracking of any particular KPI is, does give more insight into the reader and also the residents of West Berkshire of how our performance is either improving, worsening, or remaining the same. So yes, I very much would take that on board. Any sort of corporate report which I've seen in my own corporate career has that journey, direction of travel, and it's then looking to my right, Beatrice, of how we go, the best way of go about that, of showing whether it's an arrow up or down, or something which is easy for you to read, taking and bearing in mind the fact that not everyone can see the colours as I can.
Thank you.
Councillor Matharesh.
Thank you, Chairman. And first of all, I pretty much agree with Councillor Sumner and Councillor Contingham's point is that this report, although thanks to the officer's Beatrice, I can thank you. It is a very well presented report in the format and easy to read, but I agree with that the data points needs to be backed up with the past and then the forward plan. But I just point out to the actual contents of the measures itself, which I want to draw down to some positives. First of all, the measure against the funding on the general funds, maintaining its 10 million, so it's such exceeded the target, so which is in a healthy position. And then the agency staff expenditure is coming down, although there could be a indicator to say, is it 7.5 million against 7.5 million targets, which means that we targeted for 7.5 million, which seems to be indicating that we targeted and we didn't want to save, but I'm pretty sure that there was saving there. But I just want to point out to other aspects and positives against the measure of affordable homes delivery and then the strategy to have the home in use. But what I'm trying to read the point 7, if you notice the point 7, measure 7, let's say affordable homes complete and ready for occupation was target for 150. Are we, like, from my perspective, I'm trying to read this as a council, we are targeting 150 affordable homes and we delivered 185, which seems to be indicating that we have only 450 people or need for that housing units, which I don't think it's true, isn't it? Because we need more affordable housing. And is it that target coming from the developments or the homes which we planned and built and delivered? Or is it the total number of affordable homes which we need in this district, and there were 185 delivered? So something like that, to present in a way that we know that it's not the right need in terms of affordable housing. And I know examples we discussed that it's some of the providers were not able to take in those affordable homes. So we're just letting it go. And on the send, the children achieving, so we haven't met the target. I know we can see the reasons, the commentary is clear. So we are working there, and it's a good report. I want to commend on the officers as well as the team behind in making sure that these targets are measured, as well as working to achieve the targets or exceed the targets, which is good. And on the things which we have not achieved, it's very transparent. And I would say, but with additional information, as Councillor Somner and Councillor Reid said, we could make this improve and make it more transparent for the public to see what we are doing. Thank you, Chair.
Councillor Cottingham.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Councillor Armitage. I think, as you quite rightly identified, context is everything. And context is understanding how the target was set and the transparency of what the governance is over the various targets of whether it's 3%, 150, 85%, etc. It's making sure that we're having stretch targets which improve the performance. And targets should always be assessed, improved, making sure that they are achievable, but also realistic. But I think also within the report, it might be something which we can look at of showing what the thought process and the governance is over setting those targets. So there is a commentary of why we've not hit the target, but within there you need to have context of what the target was, what the thought process was as well. So that actually gives a lot more insight into the reader, ourselves, residents, of why we've gone for 150. What was the thought process a year ago, 150, and things may have changed over the end. Next year's target may be 200 because we've achieved 185. I'm sort of pre-assessing what that process is, but I think there needs to be, as I say, an insight in the governance of the target setting.
Councillor McKinnon and then Councillor Reid.
Thank you very much, Chairman. I think what's striking about this performance report is just how little of the administration's manifesto is actually being tracked. I think it's important to remember that the administration is where they are, or are where they are, because the public read their manifesto in 2023 and thought, yeah, we prefer that one to all the others. And I've heard many times over the last 2 years the justification for spending hundreds of thousands of pounds on Faraday Road and implementing the pedestrianisation extended of the town centre because it was in your manifesto. Well, that's fine, but you can't have it both ways then. Your manifesto is your contract with the voters. Your voters expect you and demand that you implement it. It was quite nicely put together, your manifesto, actually. Do you remember the big 6 to fix, guys? You all stood for election on that one. It was quite a snappy little phrase. One of the big 6 to fix was providing care packages. We'll be ensuring care packages are in place as early as possible through earlier initial care assessments. Apparently that was one of the 6 most important things that the Liberal Democrats were going to do in administration. There's not one performance indicator measuring that in this report, and I think that's a scandal. Another one of the big 6 to fix was removing the green bin tax, your words. That's not a performance indicator either. I understand that that manifesto commitment's not going to be met.
Okay, sorry, let Councillor McKinnon make his point, please. Thank you.
So I'm looking at your manifesto right now, Councillor Pattenden, and it says remove the green bin. Turn around. Let me see again. Where are we? Yeah,
Okay.
the first one.
Can I just suggest, sorry, can I interject here? Now, this is based on the council strategy, isn't it? And looking back at that, I mean, it may be a lesson learned for any administration to make sure that anything they say in an election is transformed into that council strategy. But having said that, we are looking at how we're meeting the council strategy. So I think a lesson learned for any administration in the future is to make sure that that translates across.
Well, what I'll say on that, Chairman, is that the council strategy does evolve, doesn't it, over a 4-year term? It's not set in aspic at the start. And I think it's a valid point to say that if you've got the big 6 things in your manifesto, fixing potholes, we'll commit to fixing potholes properly first time and fix dangerous ones within 72 hours. Why are these not being tracked? And how can the residents be comfortable that you're serious about fulfilling your promises if these aren't worthy of tracking as part of your performance?
Councillor Cottingham.
Right. Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Councillor McKinnon. I think, as you said there earlier, strategies evolve, and the fact that we've taken feedback from residents that these are the important aspects which they want us to track.
Okay. Very quickly, Councillor McKinnon, because I've got a couple of other hands showing.
Okay,
Yeah.
Is that just a confirmation then that many of those manifesto commitments are now considered by the administration as not worth pursuing or tracking?
Not at all. We are.
Sorry, can we allow Councillor Cottingham to answer? Thank you.
Not at all. Is that just because they're not in this report is that we are still tracking them. It's just that they're not being reported within the performance report for Q4.
Okay.
Fine.
Very, very quickly.
Different topic.
If it's going to be a different one, can I bring in a couple of other people who've
course
been
you can.
waiting a while? Thank you. I saw Councillor Reed's hand and then Councillor Amatharaj. Then I'll come back to Councillor McKinnon. Thank you.
Just going back to the dashboard we've got here, and the fact that scrutiny is now being split into 3 different areas. Can I suggest that we have highlighted in the next report when we're looking at this, ones that are in our remit, and then we can have a little bit more information under there. And I absolutely understand Councillor Somner's point around colour blindness. I'm actually colourblind in a different part of the spectrum, so I can't tell the difference between purples and blues and all that sort of stuff. They all look just blue to me. But also cognizant I've got some friends actually and children who are dyslexic. So again, huge volumes of words are not great either. So, some sort of tabulation, some sort of things. May I say that The Economist is really good at doing that sort of stuff. But if there's an equivalent of doing The Economist looking at council services, that would be fantastic. That way, I think we can get to Councillor McKinnon's point, is then we can really drill down onto the points like potholes. What is the change going from 50 to 40 millimetres making, has there been enough time to be able to say, yes, there's a positive point about that? Are we achieving that fix in 28 days? If not, why not? Would be really interesting to see in this report. It's the why nots, I think, are the interesting things. Just my thoughts.
Anything on that, Councillor Cottingham? No? Okay. Councillor Amatharaj.
Thank you, Chairman. I'll be really quick, not going into refuting all of the points, but just wanted to bring back the attention that, as you mentioned, that it's these measures tracking and highlighting what we've achieved is against the measures, not against the policies per se, and it aligns to the overall council strategy we all adopted. So it's perfectly fine to highlight, I think, additional data points, additional measures to be included. I think we will all agree to it, and I think we should try to restrain ourselves in going into that policy areas where they are subjective or they are like picked up from somewhere, not included in this council document. So I would still comment on this and take, I think, feedback from their opposite side to include any measures which is not being tracked currently. Yeah, thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Did you want to say anything on that, Councillor Cottingham? No. Okay. Councillor McKinnon.
Thank you very much, Chairman. And it was a question on the petitionisation point, Councillor Cottingham, in the report. This is part 10 or item 10, delayed. And I know that this is as of March 2024, but in the commentary there, we're told about a pre-trial consultation, which was carried out between September and November 2024, where residents, businesses and visitors shared their views on the proposal. Unfortunately, the results of that consultation are not included, which I think is a bit unsatisfactory. What were the results of that consultation?
Thanks, Chair. Thank you, Councillor McKinnon. Straightforward question, straightforward answer. I don't know. I don't have that to hand. So that's more of a question for the portfolio holder, Mr. Gourley. Go do it on Thursday. He does have some interesting feedback of how the pedestrianisation is going from a footfall and also increase in business. So again, he will be sharing that with you on Thursday.
Councillor Sumner.
Thank you, Chair. Just an observation from me, really. Appendix B, the table therein. I think that the tendency is to go for putting comment in where it's mitigating the circumstances. I actually think the administration is missing a trick on this, if I'm honest, because actually where it's been achieved, why not put that down that it's been achieved because, and have a bit of learning and again information for the residents when they are looking at how the authority has performed. I understand that's potentially a considerable amount of work, especially at this stage for officers, and I'm not trying to ramp up the amount of work that they need to do, but it's just a general comment. When I look through the table, skim through the table, it's like, well, there's a lot of blank cells on there, and it's around things where actually something positive could be reflected. Just an observation, Chair. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Councillor Summer. I think that's probably the psychology of us as humans. The fact that sometimes we don't celebrate our successes as much as we should do, and we're very quick to give commentary where we're not hit something. But I think, as you quite rightly identify, we should celebrate where we achieve something and take those lessons learned across the entire business of West Berkshire Council to celebrate that and give good credit to the officers who've delivered.
Exactly that. Thank you.
Great. Any other comments on that? There's one very quick comment from me, 5.21. It talks about corporate health. It says the average number of working days used for sickness absence is 10.1. So is that an average across all of our officers? Because that does seem like a very high number.
Yes, and like you, when I first saw that number, I felt it was high and need of improvement. But yes, we are working to improve the level of sickness across our employees.
So I think we've got a mental health programme, haven't we, where we've got staff who are mental health first aiders and so on, and they do various activities.
Yeah,
That's
so
correct, yeah.
we do have a number of trained mental health first aiders. We've got an employee wellbeing programme, so we've got employee assistance programme so officers can access support. We've got occupational health. So I think there is a fairly robust offer, and we are very conscious of those numbers, particularly given all of the demands and increasing demands in terms of kind of services. So there is a detailed report going to Personnel Committee, and there is more detail in that report that kind of gives some explanation as to why that is. And actually, given those numbers, there is a further report coming back to Corporate Board to see if there's anything else that we can or should be doing. So yes, that is in hand and on our radar.
Thank you very much for that. So you've had quite a good discussion around that. I think we've got a few lessons that we could probably wrap up into a recommendation. So the notes I've got here, we need continuity of presentation, the direction of travel, maybe some arrows to indicate whether we're going up or down, address the issue of the colours, because some people might struggle to see the colours, a bit of commentary about why targets were set and the governance process for those targets, how strategies evolve, indicate which ones are relevant to each scrutiny committee. Now, I suspect that might cause quite a lot of work for officers. I wonder whether it's best to just receive the report as we usually would. And we just have to be mindful, I think, that anything relating to resources and place would be for us to look at, unless, you know, officers think there is a way that they could present it so that it's relevant to each of the three. But yeah, and then just finally, some extra data points and also some positive learning. Yeah. Did you want to say anything else about that?
No, I think that's a fair summary of what we've discussed. And as I say, the purpose of this committee is to improve. I think some very good points are being discussed, and appreciate the feedback. Well, Beatrice, appreciate the feedback, and hopefully our leader does as well.
Okay, great. And thank you very much for all of your work on this, and thank you for coming along this evening. Good. Would members like a 5-minute break to do some star jumps and get the oxygen flowing through the brain cells? Because I'm conscious it's been a very hot day, and it's entirely up to you. Yeah. Like literally 5 minutes just to... No? Okay. All right. We'll crack on then. Thank you very much indeed for that. Right. Annual report. So this is an item for me. As members will be aware, I think this is the second year that we've done an annual report into scrutiny. So this one, again, looks at all of the work of Scrutiny Commission that was done up to the end of the previous municipal year and doesn't relate to this new committee, but it basically summarises what we did and also what the Health Scrutiny Committee did. And the idea behind this is that we present it to full council and then it is published on the website as last year's was. Do members have any comments on the content of the report?
Thank you, Chairman. It is well presented report as always. Like it used to be, like multiple agendas. Now I think it's a consolidated summary, and it's very good. And it highlights the important activities or the task group activities and the actions we are tracking. So thank you, Milton.
Great, you're welcome. Councillor Reid.
Again, I'd like to reiterate that it's a superb report and very well written. But one of the points that obviously has been brought up by Councillor Cottingham and we know is quite concerning about the bottom line for this council is the send high needs block and delivering better value. And obviously we're handing that across effectively to a different scrutiny committee. All I can say is maybe we can pass on a message to them of the utmost importance of that delivering better value, that we saw no evidence that that programme really wasn't, didn't seem to be delivering any better value. And I know it's a national programme and there is a lot of criticism in the press about that at a national level. So I think residents would be very interested in hearing from the other scrutiny committee that's looking at that, on whether that's now being turned around and what other councils are seeing as delivering better value and what we could learn from that.
Thank you, Councillor Reid. Obviously, the next report will have to be drafted in a different way because there's now 3 committees, so we'll probably have pages dedicated to each of those. But I think, yeah, if there are any cross-cutting issues, I think we need to be mindful of that in the report. We don't want everything to be boxed up and for people to not see the overall picture. Yeah. Okay. And can I convey my thanks to Gordon Oliver and Vicky Phoenix for their work on drafting this report? If we can minute that, thank you very much. Good. Okay. We need to vote on this. Do I have a proposer, please? Councillor Wollaston, thank you. Seconder, Councillor Cottam. All those in favour? Thank you very much indeed, colleagues. Great. Okay. On to task and finish groups. So we currently have 3 live task and finish groups, including the Sports Hub, Project Management, which are both under the purview of this committee, and also Children's Mental Health, which is under the purview of Children and Young People's Scrutiny Committee. So not 1 for us, so 2 for us and 1 for somebody else. Councillor Reid, do you want to give an update on where we are with the Project Management one?
Sure. We had an initial briefing conversation just to get the terms of reference and the agenda baselined. which everyone agreed. We even got dates in diaries, but unfortunately with the new reorganisation of the scrutiny and adjustment of which officers are going to support us, we've had to delay that. So we're going to do another kick-off, so to speak, and I'll be catching up with Mr. Chard on that. We've got a Teams meeting in diary because unfortunately I have a day job as well. So we'll be talking remotely, putting some proposals to the rest of the members when we can get that completed. But otherwise, we'll be sticking very much to the well-founded agenda items that we've got in there. We've also got some feedback from one other council. So I've spoken to Kent and they've given some additional information. Winchester did originally, Hampshire did originally say they would help us, but they've gone a little bit quiet. I will try and chase them up again, but be useful, but lots of information back from Kent. So.
Great. And do you have a rough timetable for when you anticipate completion? I know it's a bit like how long's a piece of string sometimes.
I'll get back to you on that one once we've had the confirmation and everyone's explored their diaries for that essential space.
And I think, were we going to look at an example of best practice in a project that we've done at West Berkshire, as well as looking to what other councils have done?
Very good point, actually. And maybe that's something I should have brought up with Mr. Chard, that we'll have a chat about that and saying, absolutely, we should be looking for an exemplar project that's been delivered in the past in West Berks, that we can, hopefully, we've still got a project manager or an officer around from when that was delivered, and we can learn from that.
Great. Fabulous. Thank you very much. Councillor Sumner.
Thank you, Chair. I just wonder, for purpose of the agenda, as much as anything else, could we just have a framework of what the task and finish groups are and who's heading it up, and just maybe a brief synopsis of what they're doing? I'm fine with it staying as a verbal item. I don't think it needs a full report, but just a framework on that page would be, I think, useful.
So whenever we approve setting up a task and finish group, we approve the terms of reference. But I don't think there's any reason why, if we have a standing item on this, that we shouldn't include those for each one, just to refresh our memory about who's working on it and what the objectives are. Yeah, I'm happy if other members are happy with that, because I'm conscious that these discussions get lost over several months. Okay, that's great. Thank you very much indeed. Right, I'll give you an update on the Sports Hub Task and Finish Group. So I'm going to read something out just for everyone's information and clarity. The Task and Finish Group completed its report in the first week of February, and Corporate Board on the 18th of February concluded that it had concerns with the report. I met with senior managers on the 3rd of March to seek feedback about their concerns. On the 13th of March, Scrutiny Committee voted to do more work on the report. On the 3rd of April, I met with senior management and Councillor Brooks. Since then, the Task and Finish Group has met twice more, once to ensure everything that had happened since the Corporate Board meeting on the 18th of February was captured in writing, and a second time to formally seek evidence from 2 additional officers. The minutes of the first meeting are approved, and member comments on the minutes of the second meeting are currently with the clerk. So where we now are is as follows. We're still waiting for suggested redactions from the legal team. This would mean some elements of the report would not be discussed in public at a scrutiny meeting. I urge them to do this because meanwhile, all of our important recommendations, including around project management and the playing pitch strategy, are gathering dust. The monitoring officer has asked for written evidence that the rugby club witness was content that the report be published. Several weeks ago, the witness told one of our task group members that they have no problems with the report. Indeed, the information about their financial history was already in the public domain, but we are told it must be in writing. This is the 4th task and finish group I've been involved in, and we have never had to ask witnesses for their written approval ahead of publication before. We still await a written response from that witness. They have been chased, but they are not obliged to respond to our email. We'll continue to chase them. We're still awaiting evidence to back up claims made in the recent evidence session. One thing that is clear is that guidance for task and finish groups needs to be clearer. We were told the report was too long, but it is shorter than the LRAE task and finish report from 2020. We were told it had too many recommendations, but it has less than the customer services task and finish report that was completed a couple of years ago. We were given contradictory advice about the acceptability of councillors being involved in the drafting of the report. It's been clarified that councillors can draft task and finish reports. This needs to be resolved, and without an OSMC, the 3 chairmen of scrutiny committees will need to liaise with officers about this to ensure that any new guidance is applicable to all 3 committees. Otherwise, I think we risk this happening again. I mentioned earlier that there is a section on the intranet with various documents about best practice in scrutiny and our regulations and rules and so on. I think we need to look at that very carefully and come up with some very clear rules and regulations around task and finish groups and what can and can't be done. And I think Councillor Reid would probably agree with me that would be beneficial for the project management one and certainly for any future work. And I think we probably need to discuss this with Councillor Vickers vis-a-vis her existing task and finish group as well, just so that we've got consistency across the piece. At our last meeting, we agreed to refer our report to the local government ombudsman, which we will do regardless of whether the report ever comes before this committee. Do members have any questions? Councillor McKinnon.
Thank you, Chairman, and thank you for that update. I'm conscious that that is one side of the story, and I'm sure that you present it in good faith. Members of the committee don't have access to, I think, any other side of the story. So you mentioned things like contradictory evidence being provided from officers, conversations with the monitoring officer and other officers. Those officers are not able to put their position to the committee this evening in the way that you have. So I think for this committee to have full sight of the facts, what provisions would you suggest that we might have to speak to other people involved in the process?
So members of the task and finish group, including myself, Councillor Marsh, Councillor Reid, Councillor Cottam and Councillor Dick. So members of this committee are very free to go and speak to any of them to get their view. I'm very happy if officers want to give their view at this meeting as well. I'm very open to and transparent about that. Anyone is free to speak. Councillor McKinnon.
I think in the case of some officers, that would be constitutionally inappropriate to give that view in public. So I wonder if sort of private conversations might be facilitated.
Sure. Yeah, that's no problem. Councillor Sumner.
Thank you, Chair. I mean, it sounds like it's becoming a case for scrutiny in its own right. I mean, I haven't been to many scrutiny meetings, and primarily they've been as a substitute. Is part 2 a thing that you've explored, and does it have the potential to allow that conversation to take place without it being made public record?
So we've asked for some redactions from the legal team. When we receive those, we could present the report with the redactions obviously taken out, and those could be in part 2, and then we could look at the rest of the report in part 1. Just before the meeting that we had of Scrutiny Commission on the 13th of March, officers proposed that we went to part 2 for a discussion. And as members who were there at the time will recall, I wasn't prepared to propose that. And I opened the floor to discussion, and Councillor Pattenden proposed that we do some more work on the report. And that vote was carried by the members.
Thank you.
Thank you. Any other comments? No. Okay. Thank you very much for that. But as I say, I think a really important lesson from this is we need clarity about what a task and finish group does, how we select the membership thereof, because back in the day I was told it had to be politically balanced, and then we looked at the constitution, it doesn't have to be politically balanced, and that's the reason why we had 2 Greens on it, for example. So all of those things need to be very, very clear so that any member of this committee and the other committees can look at it, any member of the public can look at it and say, okay, I know what this thing is and I know what its parameters are. Yeah. So I suggest as a recommendation that the 3 chairmen of those committees go away and do that piece of work with Democratic Services. Is that acceptable? Yeah. Okay, thank you. Good. Right. Appointment of task and finish groups. We haven't got any other task and finish groups at the moment to appoint anybody to. We are trying to just do one at a time because I'm conscious of officer capacity. So Mr. Oliver is carrying on with us on the Sports Hub. Mr. Child, I believe, has taken on the project management one. So, and Mr. Oliver is now looking after the Children's Services Committee. So we just need to be careful. We've basically got Mr. Chard to do these, so we just need to be mindful of that. Thank you. Okay, executive forward plan, colleagues. Any comments on this? So this is a standing item. We always get this to have a look through and see if there's anything that we want to put on our own work programme. I think probably one of the biggest issues is local government reorganisation. And I'm conscious that there are some dates coming up for that. So there's going to be a full council meeting on the 16th of October. And it's also going to executive on the 6th of November. Now, I don't know, does it have to come to full council before it can, our proposal can go to the government, basically?
So it doesn't need to go to full council, and sorry, because I did a webinar earlier, so I may have thought I've had this conversation in this forum today, and so apologies. It may have been on my webinar. So the proposal is that we will bring an outline to scrutiny in September. So we want to bring this through scrutiny as a first port of call. I don't think that at that point we will have the final document. And so, but the proposal is that full proposal to be submitted to government will go to full council. So all members will have sight of that. Council will make a recommendation to executive because legally only executive can make this decision. So it is a slightly unusual route, but I think that is the route by which we consider that, and I think the administration are eager that all members feel ownership of this decision as far as possible. I mean, obviously legally that rests with the executive, but everyone will have the opportunity to contribute, and we will bring that update to scrutiny in September, as I say. So hopefully, if there are concerns, that they can be fed in as well. By September, I anticipate we will have quite a lot of the detail around kind of certainly around engagement and the outcomes of the survey. So I think we're already starting some of that analysis. So all of that will come back. And if we've got any of those early indications around potential efficiencies and financial viability, then that can also be fed in. So yeah.
Great. So that seems very timely then if that comes to us in September. I'm conscious that we've got quite a big agenda for the 16th of September, so we might have a bit of a rethink about that. It might even be worth us having a special meeting about local government reorganisation, just so we can go through it in detail. Okay. I went to, myself and Mr. Chard went to a Centre for Governance and Scrutiny seminar last week online about local government reorganisation. It was very interesting because not only did they talk about the opportunities and risks involved, but they also talked about how you actually transition the role of scrutiny as well. So they were talking about how when they set up the shadow authority, they have a separate scrutiny committee that focuses on the new authority, basically, and then you have the legacy scrutiny committees focusing on anything that needs wrapping up before you move over. So I think there are different ways of doing this, and I think we need to be a bit mindful of that as well. So maybe we can look out for best practice from other authorities about that. So it's not only what is the council doing, but how does scrutiny have that role longer term in that process? Okay. The exec plan, I'm conscious there's quite a few mentions in there about asset disposal. So that seems to be a kind of standing item for every exec meeting. And I know we've talked about asset disposals this evening. Do we want to do anything specific around that? Councillor McKinnon.
Yeah, maybe let's hold fire on that until after Thursday, because I do want to explore this asset disposal and what the new PIB strategy is, if it has changed. But can we maybe have a chat offline, you and I, next week?
Sure. Yep, that's fine. Okay. And then May 2026, I'm conscious we've got quite a big agenda for September. We've got a meeting in November, and then we've got a meeting in February. In May, executive are looking at waste, leisure, and the LRIE, which probably needs to be changed to Bond Riverside, and Gateway Plaza. So let's also be mindful of whether we want to look at any of those things. And anything we don't cover off in September, November, we'd have the opportunity in February. So if we're mindful of that. Okay. Yeah, Councillor Reid.
I also noticed, obviously, because one of the most things the council's here is to support people who are in desperate need. And I noticed the proposed allocation of the Household Support Fund 25-26 hasn't got a date against that by Mr. Kapara. And my understanding is it's been quite successful so far. It'd be actually good to hear, I think, an update on that as well.
Yeah, I think there have been updates to previous full councils or execs about that, where they've said how much money has been given out.
Okay.
And I think there was some information about there are still hard to reach groups who don't necessarily get the money because they're not aware that it's available. And I think one of the recommendations at the time was, let's look at how we make sure that those people can get access to that money. But yeah, let's keep an eye on that. Because I think I agree with you, Councillor Reid, it is a good example of the support that we can give to people. But we need to keep an eye on whether it's actually getting to the people who are in most need. Okay. Okay, any other comments on the exec forward plan? No. Okay. One thing I will mention, we've now got sight of the corporate programme plan. Did I mention earlier about putting that on? Yeah, great. So we'll have that as a standing item in the future. I think it makes sense to look at it all together. Right, work programme. We have had a Thames Water and Environment Agency special meeting for 3 years on the trot now. And obviously we've had instances with flooding and sewage. Last year we looked at the council's Section 19 report into the flooding and the action that it was going to take. I'm going to propose something that might be controversial. Bearing in mind how much work we've got to do, I propose that we push this back, maybe by 6 months or maybe even a year, bearing in mind that we didn't have the flooding that we thought we were going to have in the winter, and in fact we might actually face drought. Councillor Pemberton has said to me in a conversation that he would be happy to give us more information about emergency preparedness, because we obviously need to focus on the flooding and the drought. They're going to be increasing problems because of climate change, as we know. So I would welcome your views, members, on what you think. So when we changed to the new scrutinies, provision wasn't made for the meeting that we would usually have in October about this. So we've got a meeting in September, meeting in November, but nothing in October for Thames Water. And if we were going to have a special meeting, we would have to schedule an extra meeting in addition to the ones we've already got. So, Councillor Wollaston.
Given the uncertainties within Thames Water at the moment, you've all been reported pretty heavily in the press, I think your suggestion of pushing it back makes a lot of sense.
Okay. Any other comments? Councillor Amatharaj.
Thank you, Chairman. And also to add a Section 19 report is so we can push back 6 months to review that report, and Councillor Gawley is keen on presenting that one and aspects and recommendations and implementation of the flood alleviation scheme. So we can push back on that one to review this as a sort of holistic view rather than focusing on them.
Okay. So can I propose that at our meeting in November, we have this discussion again as part of the work programme and say, okay, what do we want to do? Do we want to set up a meeting for the new year, or do we actually want to push it back so it's effectively a year after we last looked at it? So if we have that as a placeholder, just to make sure we don't forget about it. Great. I realise I apologise to any flood wardens who might be watching and who might not be happy about this proposal, but we do have a lot of, I think I counted there's something like 23 service areas that we cover at this committee. So we are spread pretty thinly. We need to make sure that we look at other areas as well. Social housing, we mentioned earlier when we talked about the action log, and we talked about repairs, hikes in charges, sale, where that money, those proceeds are spent, etc., etc. Would members like to have a separate item on social housing? Would you like to have a special meeting? Would you like to have a one-off task group, which is a thing, believe it or not? I don't know whether we've ever used that. So I'm conscious Thames Water and the Environment Agency, we're very happy to come to us and have a discussion in public, but that might not always be the case. As we know, external organisations are not obliged to come and speak to us, but obviously from their own point of view, they think it's probably good to be seen to be transparent, but some organisations, for whatever reason, might not wish to do that. So what are your views about whether we have a standard item, special meeting, one-off task and finish group? Over to you, Councillor Cottam.
Yeah, as probably people have heard from me in the past, I'm concerned about the lack of our ability to bring forward social housing. And every time it comes to a planning committee, it just gets brushed to one side. I think it's important we look at it because at the moment it's not working. I can't remember a major application where it's not brushed aside. We also have in North East Thatcham plans coming forward. There will be a master plan coming forward. I think we need to look at how we should approach that, because that's one of the biggest opportunities to make housing available to people who live in the area, as opposed to just sucking in new people. So that people that were born, brought up here, have the ability to live here. So I think to me, it's an important issue that we should address strongly.
Yeah, thank you. Councillor Matharaj.
Thank you, Chairman. I agree with Councillor Cottam. Like someone who's been highlighting this topic, and we picked up a number of issues in our number of conversations, is that like we need some accountability from the housing providers, and it will be an opportunity to check. Yeah, as you said, it's not they need to come to it, but if they come and answer our questions, and if it is in a public forum, we can understand more about their problems as well in terms of how they are facing issues. I would say like maybe one, not a task and finish group, but one meeting to include them and give them enough time with questions before, like we did with the EA and Thames Water, and they are prepared for that meeting, and then maybe invite some public representation and parish councils maybe and town council to present their views, because they are not parish councils but towns may be interested to understand their part of the provisions as well, people coming to them. So it will be an interesting one to have that meeting as a public forum, not as a task group one, in my view. Thank you.
And we could probably include public protection, environmental health in that as well, I think, because there have been instances where people's accommodation has been in such a poor state that our officers have had to go out and condemn the properties effectively, so that they may be able to contribute to that meeting and talk about how they deal with such a situation. Councillor Sumner.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. We need to be careful and clear on the terminology that we're using and what we are trying to achieve. Social housing to me is one group. Affordable housing is a different group. And I think we need to be mindful of that. So in planning terms, what we tend to get, and I think Councillor Cottam was probably more leaning towards, is the conversations that go around affordable housing. And I totally take your point. I think we just need to be clear on what we're trying to achieve and what we're trying to get clarified on.
Yeah.
And I think also to understand, as part of the conversation, to understand what the different options are that are out there. And I think of Eagle Quarter as another conversation that's been in play recently, which brought another model which I don't think most people had recognised before, maybe weren't comfortable with as an option. So it's I think a lot of it is going to be a case of gathering all the different options that we've got as an authority and what it is that actually we're trying to achieve. And let's not try to reach too far. There are some potentially fairly achievable things which we should be looking at first, which I think can be built. But yeah, let's get the pencil out and draw around what we're trying to achieve and understand what we're talking about. I think that's going to be crucial.
Yeah, thank you very much, Councillor Sumner. So it would be social housing, so it wouldn't be affordable housing, which people obviously move into privately, but social housing that's managed by social housing companies, essentially, so Sovereign, A2, Dominion, etc. And I think there are 3 or 4 others that provide locally. Yeah, but no, clarity, absolutely. Councillor Reid and then Councillor Coyle.
Just a few points. So I suppose that one of the questions is some of the original social housing that's been around for hundreds of years, whether we talk about almshouses. We do have the chair of the Almshouse Association for England in West Berkshire. He's a resident of West Berkshire. So he's raised with me in the past issues where they cannot get easy access to SIL funding, for example, can be a particular issue to them. Obviously, I understand with the affordable housing, but obviously social housing companies look to invest into that affordable housing stock to be able to make their stock. And I hear, whether it's true or not, or hearsay, a lot of social housing companies are looking to divest from this area into more larger urban areas because they see it as more profitable effectively, or the returns are higher. So that would be a very interesting. And the final point is ones that specialise in rural areas and don't necessarily buy the huge blocks, but literally go 4 or 5 houses in a small rural development, but they effectively be tied to local residents that are born and brought up in that area or working in the area, with social needs. Might be a paramedic or a nurse or various other bits and pieces, and they get and how that scoring is worked out by the council for the housing needs as well. I think that would be interesting to get a briefing on that and what policy is driving that.
Yeah. And somebody mentioned antisocial behaviour earlier as well, I think, when we first raised this under the action plan. Yeah, no, good points. Thank you, Councillor Reid, for that. Councillor Coyle.
I think your original question, Chair, was about how to do this. I completely agree with it being really important, but I think there's quite a few different areas that have been mentioned, and I'm not sure about one special meeting to cover all those different areas, because I think, so for example, there was a mention of antisocial behaviour just now, but also then broadly the other 2 areas seem to be disrepair and social housing, and then broadly speaking, around assets, around the social housing assets in the borough, and whether that be through the creation of new social housing in developments or the disposal of existing social housing. That seems to be one big area, and then disrepair, and then there was mention of antisocial behaviour. So I don't know whether those need to be treated. Certainly, I wouldn't think that they could be all dealt with in one meeting, and I wonder whether they might need to be dealt with in a different ways. I don't know. I'm just speculating in terms of whether we have one meeting that looks at one of these things, possibly the issue that we're talking about the kind of the actual availability of social housing, and then something like the disrepair issue is dealt with in a different way. But I'm quite new to scrutiny, so I don't know what's more appropriate for which, but I certainly don't think they should be dealt with in the same meeting.
Yeah, no, I think your point about the antisocial behaviour is well made, Councillor Coyle. I think probably the way we could characterise it is the resilience of social housing provision in West Berkshire. So that would include repairs. Is it resilient for the people who live in it already? Is it resilient for the long term if they're going to sell off property and not reinvest those funds in the local area? That's going to undermine resilience because the provision isn't going to be there. And I think getting some clarity on that, because I know that there is an argument that some of the properties are offloaded because they can't meet the environmental performance certificate. But I do know that some houses have been offloaded that could, because I actually looked on the estate agents' websites. And then the fees that Councillor Amatharaj has raised, again, is it resilient? Can people still afford to live in that social housing if the fees are hiked up? So maybe we could characterise it as resilience of social housing for the future, maybe. But yeah, I think your point about antisocial behaviour probably is a good one, actually. Councillor Wollaston.
Just a thought, because I think there's probably some misunderstanding, like I say, about the difference between social and affordable housing and the impact of the housing associations and what they do. I just wonder whether it might be sensible to ask the housing team to do a sort of a placement report, for want of a better phrase. So there's a briefing note of where we are at the moment.
Sure.
And it could also encompass, can we use more? There is some government money available for buying housing. Could we use SIL money? Could we use Section 106 money to actually rebuild some of our stock of our own housing for social use?
Because we were going to do a project, weren't we? I can't remember what it was called a few years ago where we built some of our own.
Yeah.
Yeah, okay. No, that's a good point, councillor Wollaston. So shall I go and ask the housing team then for a bit of guidance on this and how they think? I mean, I've had the views of councillor Gaines on this. But yeah, it probably would be a useful thing to talk to the officers as well and just try and shape something up. And then maybe if we bring that back to the September meeting under the work programme, we can have a bit more of a discussion about it. But yeah, give some thought to whether you think you want it as a standard item, a special meeting or a one-off task and finish. I mean, the advantage of a one-off task and finish is it doesn't have to be us who look at it. We could get other backbench councillors to be involved. So the two groups might be aware of other backbenchers in their teams who are very keen on that topic and might like to be involved in that, for example. It spreads the workload and it enables people to get involved in the scrutiny process. Okay.
Chairman, just to add on the point,
Yeah.
like I always believe, like as Scrutiny Commission and as members of Scrutiny, we had the powers to request for data and understand more on the data and scrutinize those. Because the last resort I was kind of threatening on that one was freedom of information requested because I was not getting any data on the transparency on how the charges were made. So on behalf of the residents, I was going to, before I reached the chairman, and like freedom of information request. But I will wait for this one guidance in terms of understanding how they operate, how they charge the their residents, and how on the point being is it resilient or is it really affordable in terms of their social housing, how they're pushing people into poverty potentially. So yeah, I always thought like Scrutiny Commission had the powers to look into those aspects.
Yeah. Absolutely. So councillors and officers of this council are obliged to come to scrutiny, but outside organisations are not. So yeah, just for clarity, with Thames Water and the Environment Agency, they came of their own volition, essentially. I mean, I think from those organisations' own point of view, it's probably a good thing to come and see to be transparent. And in my experience, they've both got funding difficulties, but they both have tried to engage and to be transparent. So hopefully the housing associations would adopt the same approach. Okay, that's very useful. Thank you very much, members. The next local plan, I don't know if we want to have a look at that. Obviously, we've recently adopted the latest local plan. My understanding is that the government want councils to increase the number of houses that they build. So we may have to start developing a new local plan pretty quick. I think the numbers, if I'm correct, have nearly doubled, you know, what's in our current local plan. Now, I'm conscious that Planning Advisory Group doesn't exist anymore, and it's been wrapped up into Policy Development Group. Now, that's one group. As Councillor Sumner will know, and I'm sure others around the table, we were involved in Planning Advisory Group, and we went through the previous local plan with a fine-tooth comb, and we had many, many meetings about it, and that wasn't the only thing that PAG looked at. And now we've only got one Policy Development Group. So shall we try to seek some guidance about whether or not that's going to be going to Policy Development Group and how they're planning to look at that? Because I think it's probably quite a good idea for us to just keep tabs on that, because it is a pretty big issue. And obviously with local government reorganisation, what is going to happen if we amalgamate with South Oxfordshire, which has already built a lot of houses, and suddenly our housing need shoots up? Where is that all going to go? And I think that's probably going to be quite central to discussions around local government reorganisation, because it's a very practical issue and a big challenge. So shall I get some more advice about that then? Yeah, very good. Waste strategy, I think we mentioned that. So do that next year once we know how the 3 weekly bin charges and the extra recycling are bedding in. And Councillor Amatharaj, you and I had a conversation about transport and buses. Is that something you want to pursue, or?
Chairman, I'll discuss with Councillor Gurley
Okay.
in terms of what specific ones, but if other board members want to specifically focus on the transport needs for their particular wards, I think it will be fair to reach out to either in the capital budget program or through the individual water needs. I think it would be fair to do that way instead of calling out another one. Yeah, thank you, Chair.
Okay, great, thank you. And then another topic that was suggested to me was Northbrook Street pedestrianisation. Now, I've been told the trial will still be happening in September, which is when we next meet, and it will be finishing around about November time. And the report and the decision would come after that. So the earliest potentially we could look at it is maybe February. Now, I don't know it's got quite complicated. I don't know whether it would be subject to call-in should members wish to call it in, or whether that boat has sailed. I'm not sure. But just putting that out there, people have mentioned to me they'd quite like to look at it. Any views on that? Yeah. Okay.
My only concern is how many items are we looking at now? We've got quite a list.
Yeah. Well, Mr. Chard will go through the work programme that we've got in our agenda pack and add things to it. And we will keep a watching brief on that at each meeting about what's coming up. But as we mentioned earlier, I think local government reorganisation, we might have to have a special meeting about that because we have got a lot on the agenda for September. And November will be too late. So we might have to do something in October.
Thank you.
Okay, good. Any other comments? Yes, Councillor Williston.
I have mentioned this already, Mr. Chairman. I'm concerned about the whole Northcroft dry side and whether it actually had proper executive approval, how the procurement was done, and who approved the £1 million overspend. And it seems to be being hidden over, shall I say politely. I don't know how we go about this in scrutiny, but I think someone needs to do some digging and find out what's happened.
Okay. Can I suggest we put some questions to the relevant portfolio holders and officers on that to
Yep,
speed
happy to do
things
that.
up? Because otherwise there's a danger this goes into the mix and we don't actually end up looking at it for quite a long time.
Yep.
Yeah. Is that acceptable to members? Okay. Right, we'll do that then. Councillor Wollaston.
Do you want me to draft something?
Yeah, yeah. And then if you get back to me about that, we can obviously share it with other members. Okay, good. Thank you very much. Good. Okay, so that brings us to the end of that item. So that's covered all of the items for this evening. So I will bring this meeting to a close. Thank you very much indeed to members for your participation in this. We've had a very full agenda this evening, but obviously the finances are extremely important. And our next meeting is in November, unless we have September, and then maybe in October and November as well. So, and thank you very much to officers who've come along this evening as well. Much appreciated. Thank you.
We're closed.